Okay, 25 seconds, ladies and gentlemen. As soon as I play the video, here in 10 seconds, you're going to need to let me know. I will have to open the chat for this here. You guys are going to need to let me know how the audio is, okay? If it needs to go up or down, just as a heads up. Okay, with that being said, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and here we go. Muting mic.
Hi, I'm Jonathan Rogers, Game Director on Path of Exile 2. Well, we're back from our break. We've been playing the game a whole lot, and we've been reading a whole lot of feedback as well. So it's time to assess and work out what we're going to do next. Now, later this week we'll be releasing PoE 2 0.1.1. This is a patch designed to address the concerns that we can address relatively quickly, without needing to create a new league or a new economy just yet. In this video we'll be going over some of the issues we've identified, and what we're planning on doing about them. It's worth stressing that just because a specific issue isn't on this list doesn't mean that we're not aware of it or that it isn't going to get addressed. It just means that we either can't fix the problem quickly, or we can't do so without the need for a new economy. One of the major areas that needs a lot of attention is the base experience of mapping. We've made a lot of changes here. First, in-game maps have received a balance pass to the number of monsters, number of chests, number of magical rare monsters, number of essences, strongboxes, and precursor artifacts. You should generally find maps more rewarding than before. Maps generally specialize in one or more of these elements that they will be particularly rewarding in. Now, towers are a thing that's very important for players to run often, but we only had one of them. We wanted to add more variety here as soon as possible, so we've added 4 more tower maps.
That's pretty cool.
Alpine Ridge, Sinking Spire,
Wow, these are bigger changes than I was expecting.
Bluff, and Mesa. We've also redone the existing Lost Towers map to make playing there less boring.
Nice.
We're now also spawning more maps with bosses. The rate was intended to be 1 in 4 maps, but in reality the rate was much lower due to some maps being unable to spawn bosses. We've increased the rate to compensate for this issue so that we can get the actually intended rate. We're also adding a new type of tablet that allows you to add bosses to your maps with its own mod pool. Strongboxes also needed some love. They now spawn monsters faster, have a less annoying fog effect, and have also received changes to the timings and effects of the mods on them. Now, let's talk about visibility of effects.
Free node on the
Many maps had too much clutter, preventing effects on the ground from rendering, causing you to be unable to see and dodge them. We've both changed the level of clutter on some maps, and has changed some effects to make sure that they are always visible. In addition, elemental explosion effects have had visibility improved, stick around for longer before they explode, and disappear without exploding if a rare monster dies. Volatile plants are also way easier to see before they explode. Now we've also increased the zoom level on the Atlas, done a pass on various terrain collision issues in many maps. We've also improved the load times of opening the world map and Atlas panel. And we also now show the biome of a map on the hover for it.
Well, that's nice.
For other in-game content systems, we're focusing on getting all the rewards in line with what they should be. For Delirium, we recently fixed a bug which caused Delirium monsters to just not spawn after the starting part. And we've also buffed the rate of simulacrums dropping by 20% to make it more in line with the rate of finding the
Oh shit, they
Expedition of
did
Ritual
buff
bosses.
simulacrum filters. Someone was saying to put that on the thing.
For Ritual, we've made omens now appear in the Ritual tribute window 60% more often.
Nice.
For Expedition, we've improved the rarity from the shops, but we'll be wanting to make some more substantial changes to the rewards for this league later on. Now, one of the major concerns that we're often seeing is that getting to play Pinnacle content just takes too long, and that when you do finally get there, you only get one attempt and don't get a chance to learn the boss. In order to address these concerns, we're making the following changes. First, we're making the Citadel spawn closer to the center of the Atlas, and we've also added an effect so you can see them in the fog of war from further away.
Oh, that's
This
cool.
makes them much easier
Nice.
to find. To address the problem of only having one attempt, on the Arbiter of Ash you will now get up to 6 respawn attempts. Respawns can only be triggered by the person who put in the keys, and everyone in your party will be respawned at the same time. Leaving the map still forfeits your attempt, so you'll still need to fight the boss with the build you walked into the map with. Higher difficulties of the boss will lower the number of respawn attempts you get, but you should know the mechanics of the fight by then, right? Now, we'll also be adding respawns to other Pinnacle content as well over time. Another thing that players have noticed is that there are less keys from Faradin Citadels on the market, and thought that it was because the Citadel spawns less often. It turns out though that this is just because the boss kills players more often than the others. We've made a few changes to that boss to bring it in line with the other bosses. A lot of people have reported that many of our unique items are feeling underwhelming. Uniques are often designed to be build enabling at high levels, even if they're low level uniques. But we realised that we do need to make sure that more uniques feel powerful when you first get them at low levels too. In this patch we are buffing a lot of uniques. These changes should make finding uniques at lower levels a lot more fun, and make subsequent character playthroughs more fun too when you have some great uniques to use.
Wow.
We're also changing a few other things to make finding rares better at higher levels too. First, we're changing mod weightings a bit to make sure that there are less bad mods. Another fix is making high tier items no longer cull the highest tier modifier of a given mod type. This bug caused bows and crossbows to not spawn with attack speed at tier 5 rarity, and rings to not spawn with life at tier 5 rarity.
Oh.
Another change we're making is to make it so that socketables such as runes can now be overwritten with another socketable.
Oh dang.
Now, as we continue to play, we still find many balance anomalies with specific monsters or bosses that can be nasty if you encounter them. This patch contains a pass adjusting a large number of those monsters and bosses. We'll save the full list for the patch notes, but there are a significant number of changes here that should address many cases where monsters or bosses felt too hard in certain circumstances. Here are a few examples to get a taste of what kind of changes you can expect. The Silverfist Commander role now does a lot less damage.
That thing one-shot me in the campaign.
Plague Bearer's Detonate Dead can no longer be used from off-screen and has better telegraphing. Forsaken Miners throw less grenades, have improved visuals, and deal less damage. And Lost Men Zealots can no longer meteor you from off-screen either, as well as many other changes just like those. One of the big issues for players on consoles is that the web-based item filter system is currently not working. This means that they can't use item filters like the PC users can. For 0.1.1, we'll be enabling the same system that PoE 1 has, which allows you to subscribe to item filters on the website. For now, this will be done on the PoE 1 website to allow us to get this feature out as fast as possible. Later on, we'll improve the user experience of this and put it on the Path of Exile 2 website. This patch also contains a bunch of other smaller changes and bug fixes that I'm sure you guys will appreciate, like buffing armor and scavenged plating, showing the number of uses left in your charms, as well as an effect when they trigger,
The song of the exiles.
fixing the music that Una was supposed to play in town,
Fixing her music. Okay.
and plenty of other little fixes and improvements throughout the game. Now, we have a huge amount of much more meta-shifting changes that we know we want to make.
This is nerfs.
And one of the best things about having the game in early access with the endgame is that we now have a much better idea of where we want character power
Meta
to
shift
be
equals nerf.
and what the balance of bosses and monsters should be relative to that. But those types of changes are going to have to wait until we are ready to make a new league with a new economy.
Oh
for people to
shit!
play.
No nerfs! Let's go!
That's still a little while away yet, but in the meantime we'll be continuing to identify
No
things that
nerfs.
are causing frustration and try and address them. I want to thank you guys for playing and hope to be doing more of these in the future. Later.
That's funny.
All right, so there you have it. Pretty awesome. We are now going to call them, get them ready for the interview. So we're going to go to a screen here that is a BR back.
All those
be right
people
back
wanting
type
the
of screen
spark
here.
nerfs. They're so
You will
sad
hear no
now.
audio, and it'll just be a blank screen for probably 5-10 minutes at the highest. And now we're going to do an interview about what
hilarious.
we just saw. So give us one moment here.
Okay, let's update the bingo. I can't. This is not being nerfed. Oh shit! The bingo's all nerfs. I don't think any of us are gonna win. Rip bingo. I don't think anybody. If is anybody gonna win? I didn't put enough buffs to make this possible. I guess we're all winners in the sense that Spark was not nerfed. We win where it matters. Yeah. They didn't buff anything. They didn't buff spells. Wait, what? So every skill is just the same. And we didn't get new stash tabs. Wow. Do you think Spark Gear is gonna shoot up now, or or what? Yeah, I want affinities. I feel like that can't be too hard, can it? Like, how hard is it to make affinity? Yeah, time to buy. Let me actually look at my filters and maybe buy something. They said they're making the towers more enjoyable to play, right? They're even reworking the current towers to be more enjoyable. So if they do feel more like maps, I guess it's fine. I'm kind of surprised they didn't at least buff spells. Like, you would have thought that just changing numbers on spells would be easy enough. I'm also surprised they didn't slightly nerf Archmage. Like, I would have been happy with a slight nerf. I wouldn't have mattered. They're just not gonna do anything. That's crazy.
Of audio now.
I'm for it though.
Hello, everybody. So here we are. Let's just real quick, now that we have the audience here, I'm going to have Jonathan one more time say something real quick just to make sure they can hear us well, and we'll get feedback from the chat.
Hi, I'm Jonathan Rogers, Game Director on Path of Exile 2.
Thanks, sir. Mark.
Hi, I'm Mark. Hello, this is me speaking, and I didn't want to say the same thing he said.
It's fine, you can.
All right. And then lovely co-host Gazi here.
Lovely co-host. Mic check. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3.
Excellent. So with that being said, Gazi, why don't you take it away with the intros?
Hi, welcome to Tavern Talk episode. We still have no idea what episode we're on, and we're going to keep up with that trend. We have with us my lovely co-host, Darth Microtransaction, and the lovely two individuals that is basically the OGs at this point. We got Mark and Jonathan from Path of Exile 2 Grinding Gear Games. How are you guys doing?
Oh, doing great. I mean, you know, like, it's really good to get back into things again. We had a good break, you know, like, and yeah, I don't know. It's just nice to be back and actually looking at the problems again, as much as, you know, it can be painful sometimes. But yeah, no, it's really good to get back into things.
Yeah, disconnected for a little bit. Not too long, but just a little bit, and now back, which is awesome. But no, it was a long burn last year, so it was good to get a little bit of a break over that Christmas. But yeah, lots to address, lots to change. Excited.
It
Awesome
seems
to hear.
it seems like with the break, you guys still managed to get a lot of changes in from the review video we saw. It's
Yeah,
a fairly
surprising amount of
substantial,
changes.
so
I was not expecting.
it's
Like,
exciting.
I mean, that is for the most part just stuff that we did, like, you know, last week and this week. The maps, the extra 4 maps, some of those did have some work that was done a little earlier, but for them because we knew we needed more towers and we just didn't get them in. But pretty much all that stuff is just stuff that we're, you know, just doing last week and this week. Like, we try to move, you know, fairly quickly when we can. But yeah, the thing now is of course going to be like. One issue we kind of realized we had is like, okay, how much do we concentrate on fixing problems people have right now, and how much do we concentrate on like the next big kind of content patch? And so that's like kind of the tricky thing we have to maneuver around at the moment. And I guess my feeling is so long as there's like big problems that are causing people to have you know, like a bad experience, I kind of want to make sure that those get addressed as soon as possible, at least where we can, so that we're making sure that things are in as best a state, like some kind of point of stability, so that we can concentrate on having the larger kind of like content patch after that.
That's great to hear. So for this episode or this interview or whatever we're going to call it, we've done what we can to make sure that we let the community get their voices heard. So most of the questions we're going to go through is questions collected almost exclusively from the community. We have a couple light, for some reason, questions and some warrior questions from Darth, and we have some minion questions as expected from my side of things. But most of the questions will be taken from the actual community. So I'm just going to kick us off so don't waste anyone's time. And we're going to start with a question saying, which of the changes that has been showcased was the team most excited to be able to announce?
Well, I guess that I'd say that these changes, obviously, while the players are happy with them, we're not exactly excited about them per se because these are just like fixes to things that are problems, right? So the stuff that we're excited about is the stuff we're not talking about, which is the content that's coming up in the in the larger one that'll have an economy reset and so on. So there's obviously a lot of stuff
When did
there,
that
but for
patch
this stuff,
come?
it's just
That's
like
what I
really
wanna
like,
know.
okay, what can we do to make sure that people are having a good time? That's kind of the main thing I would say.
Better ask
Which
that
is
right now.
exciting in its own
Sure,
to see
sure.
how much more we can improve, how
Sure.
many people having a good time. So
Yeah. So I mean, that's good, but yeah, really, it's like there's no one thing there where we're like, oh yeah, this is the amazing thing. It's like it's all just like, let's make the game not suck. That's kind of our main goal.
So
Good perspective.
one of the changes for in-game maps is the changes to, you mentioned monsters, chests, rare monsters. What impact are you guys hoping that this change specifically is going to have in in-game mapping?
Nice for the follow.
Well, I want this. Well, there's a couple things. It is just a general, probably 30% more kind of monsters, items, etc. from inherent maps. You get the thing where now the inherent map is higher value, and thus proportionately the league is less impactful. Say Breach, which is obviously in its own universe of craziness right now. But the idea is the base map is more rewarding, and thus adding the extra content is less necessary for, say, map sustain. The other thing is it will interact with different rolled maps differently. So we tried to do this better before early access began, but again, it should be now certain maps and certain mods that increase the chests, the rarity of chests, the rarity of monsters will have different benefits. So that's kind of cool that I want people to learn that over time and see what's beneficial. What multiplies better, and then you combine those things where you have this map's better for number of monsters, whereas this map's worse for number of monsters because they're multipliers. So like a really small map versus a really large map, actually before they were relatively consistent. Now that large map might have twice as many monsters as that small map, but it has the same density of monsters. So you don't just have big open empty spaces of nothing. So obviously now the number of packs, if you multiply that up, it has a much grander effect on the big map than it does the small map. But the small map is obviously easier to clear, faster to clear. So say if you're optimizing for bossing, you're probably going to try and have be applying more bosses to small maps using the new tablet. Or if you're doing leagues that, more like Breach, you might want smaller maps that way because you're focusing on just farming breaches as opposed to, say, Delirium, or say Expedition favors that doesn't really care if the map is large or small.
Interesting.
So having those different kind of axes is really interesting where you are thinking about that as you go. Now people have to learn that, and that's cool. I actually want people to learn that and kind of post all their details on like this map's really good and this map isn't, and we've accounted for layouts, how fast they are to clear, all of that stuff. So certain maps that were more tedious to clear now have pretty drastic advantages on at least one or two different axes. So they might have a higher number of minimum monsters, rare monsters, higher spawn rate of rare monsters, magic monsters, rare
nice.
chests, who knows.
And there was a lot of that balance that you couldn't really do until you actually had experience playing them, right? Because it's hard to tell when you're just in development and you're not on a real character. Like, is this map actually fun or not, right? And the end gamers, we've got the least amount of testing, so it really did require, like, okay, some actual proper play and be like, okay, is this map, to really answer the question of is this map good or not? So now when we see that, then we can be like, okay, we need to make this change or that change in order to sort it out. So there's just been a lot of just like sanding off all the rough edges that in-game had by virtue of the fact that it just really wasn't as tested as what the campaign was. Go on.
That all being said, I'd say one thing it has introduced is it has added more bad luck or mistake protection to some degree, because if you would like fully juice a really small bad map, that minimum of bad is now much higher. And so like you all of a sudden now have invested all this wealth into this bad map, you've run it and you're like, I didn't get anything back from it. So the minimum is certainly now much better, which should hopefully protect a lot of people who are falling out of map sustain. Whereas like a lot of the good players who are a bit more observant, a bit more familiar with PoE 1 were just like happily sustaining maps. And so you had these two ends of spectrum, and hopefully we've raised the minimum now with these changes.
So 2 follow-up questions. since this was a question for later, but since we're talking about bad maps in particular, something you mentioned here, what is your guys' opinion on the current state of maps in the game? Not so much from a monster point of view, but of a layout of maps. So there are some maps people don't like as much. There are ones people really do like as much. Is your opinion that you need maps, for instance, like Mire, Augury, Val Factory? These are some of the least favorable maps. Do you think you need maps like this in the game in order to more appreciate the more common ones people enjoy? Or what's your stance currently on the map
Augury.
Amount of variety that are in the game, put it that way?
I guess ideally, like if so, I mean, there have been a few adjustments to things like that. Probably not, like we're not necessarily going to take every map people find annoying and change it like so that people don't in that way. But certainly there should be balance changes to make it so that they feel at least worthwhile, even if they do have some more annoying layout or something like that. So I mean, I assume you feel the same way about that.
There's some standout things. Like obviously you shouldn't have
Augury,
the levers that you just can't dodge roll out of and you just die, or the levers are just spawning burning ground on them, right? Obviously this stuff is just objectively wrong and objectively bad, and that will be fixed. But a lot of that contributes to, like, this is the worst map because you'll go pull a lever and die while doing so. And then there's the ones that, yes, are just, like, inherently worse layouts, especially for certain builds. But then, again, now using this other thing where it's like, actually, well, those maps may now spawn the most amount of rare monsters or the most magic monsters or just the most amount of monsters. You're going to have to go figure some of that stuff out. And some people might like that. People with less... screen clearing AoE centric builds probably don't mind some indoor, more mazy maps if they're going to get the benefit or feel like they're getting the benefit from, more rare monsters. They've got, I don't know, more single target or a more concentrated DPS or whatever. They don't feel so bad now for running that as opposed to just running the, sand spit where you can just like nuke entire screens every 2 seconds. The bad case
of this though is definitely the tower map because it was it's like you mandatorily have to run that map, and so having that be not great is like not a good situation. So hopefully we've addressed that one. Like that was really urgent to address because it's like because it's mandatory, right? You can't just skip it. So that one had to be sorted.
Yeah, turns out it's maybe not a good thing where you have to approach a room full of monsters that you don't know what they are and they're super dangerous and you can't see them and it's a narrow bottleneck and you have to run in and just die.
But even so, like obviously the variety helps with that, but also the new version of that map is now based on the top floor tile set, which has like got more variety and like it's easier to deal with. So that should improve a lot of that.
Better visibility.
Yeah, exactly. So it helps
more open, less tight bottlenecks. They're still relatively narrow here and there, but much better to clear.
Mm-hmm.
So one more follow-up here, and I'll pass it off to Ghazi. In the reveal, you mentioned that the boss maps, for instance, were supposed to be more common than they actually were. And so this comes to a very common question about Waystone's Sustain. So what was your opinion on the state that previously was with Waystone's Sustain, as well as do you believe this impact of additional bosses are obviously going to impact Waystone's Sustain? So you think this is going to help alleviate some of the feedback we've seen related to there?
That one's pretty interesting because, and this is probably going to be a controversial thing to say, but like we don't know that there necessarily is a problem with Waystone Sustain as such. So that means we have to look into, if people say that there is, and that means we have to understand why that is, because I don't think that's the experience that like we're having as we're playing ourselves. And like, so there's always this thing where it's like we want to hear what the players say, but then we always want to confirm with our own experience that like when we do what they're doing, that we're getting the same experience before we can kind of make a good decision about what a change would be. So I don't know that we've identified why it is yet that players are having problems with Waystone Sustain, and so that's like, and this will change this obviously because there's more bosses and so on. Like that's the thing you can do. Killing bosses will give you, upgrades and so on. Like that'll help with that. But I guess I sort of like I feel like we need to understand that problem more before we can really work out what exactly needs to happen with it.
There's certainly more to learn there, but as I said before, the minimum's now higher for sure.
Right. So it can be just people running into bad specific maps that like have specific problems that someone who's.
I suspect it's also just a lot of people struggling with the difficulty and dying. And it's obviously very different if you're dying even in 30% of your maps, 20% of your maps. I mean, even 10% of your maps. It can make that difference. So yeah, there's definitely 100% more to look into there. But like, I personally, I went to from tier 1 to tier 15 maps in a total of 32 maps. And I've sustained since. And then you see the things where people are talking about map sustain. I'm like, okay, am I in a different universe? And the answer is probably
in a different universe.
The answer is probably yes, I am in a different universe. But from a purely anecdotal standpoint of my own, I try and I'm going to see how it is for myself. And I'm somewhere else. We need to look more into this somewhere. So We have other people at the office as well, of course,
they
and you
ask,
get their anecdotal experience. But we need to look at this from a much broader perspective. But either way, what we've just put forward is an improvement to all of that. Higher maximum, sure. Higher minimum, and a bit more safety for bad luck. But what it doesn't really account for right now is safety for people dying and, failing 50% of their maps or N% of their maps.
There is a slightly more subtle thing going on, I think, which it's kind of unfortunate how this turned out, but effectively, because you can power through the map tiers really fast, it means that you don't get a chance to find the gear that you would otherwise have as you went through those tiers. And that means that effectively when you do, like you might be playing higher tier maps than what you really should be playing for the amount of wealth that you found. And that means that your map sustain is bad because you're dying more often because you're kind of playing higher tier content. And that is on us because we need to adjust that so that you that you only start effectively, in order to progress up the tiers, it needs to be more that we need to sort of gear check you more as you go up a little bit to make sure that you've got the gear you need before you're going up the tiers. But this is going to be a really subtle and tricky thing to get exactly right. There's quite a lot to that. And that's kind of more of a thing that we can sort of look at over a bit of a longer period of time because it's going to require some adjustments. But yeah, that's just sort of another one. But there's quite a lot of implications to all of that. And I don't know that we're quite ready to understand exactly what would need to happen for that to happen. But that is kind of one of the issues that we're seeing is just effectively people playing content that's harder than what we would hope they would be playing for the gear that they have, which then causes the deaths, which causes the sustain to be bad. So that's kind of that issue there.
Thanks for the detailed answer. I'll throw it off to Ghazi for the next questioner.
Yeah, next in line, we're actually going to circle back to what you mentioned, Mark, regarding Expedition, not caring about the layout and whatnot, but you also mentioned, I believe it was in the video, right? You mentioned more substantial changes to Expedition coming later.
Is anyone going to do Expedition
so the question
now?
is, do you have any particular examples of these things you're hoping to accomplish with this mechanic?
Fuck that.
Yeah, I can't really say what it is, but what I can say is it is intended that every league, sort of, I'd say without promising it, because we're allowed to make exceptions. It is kind of intended that every league provides some sort of access of character or crafting power that is abnormal. And
different that you can't get anywhere
different.
else.
Mostly character power here. So aside from the unique items, obviously they can or sometimes don't provide character power that can be attained elsewhere. This is more about something else that's, similar to, say, the instilling your amulet with a notable. It's something that only that provides. It gives you more power than you would have had if you had never done it. And so ideally, every league would kind of do something like that, or provide a crafting avenue that would then give you something like that, or give you more power in general. But yeah, we just kind of have the vendor mechanic where you can do some crafts, and none of those crafts are abnormal. They're not adding extra benefits or mods or anything outside of that. So
special mods.
yeah, we have intention to add something to that, and probably to a lot more of them over time. And as you get new ones that each obviously have this thing in mind, where we're trying to say, how can we make characters feel a little bit more powerful by engaging in that content?
But that's all it needs.
Expedition just didn't quite get it when we ported it over. We discussed heaps of things, like we could add some more ROG crafts, so to speak, now that, even though it's now 3 out of 4 of them crafts.
It definitely needs something else, for sure.
It just needs something cool, something better, and something not rushed. Which is we're in a position where we're going to rush something, and it's like, hold on, let's not do that. Let's get it right and do it a bit later.
Fair. I like that take. Another question we have is regarding the Arbiter of Ash now having 6 resurrection or revive attempts, right? And other attempts to, or adding other attempts to other pinnacles over time. I guess the question comes down to, why wait with adding extra attempts?
Ultimately, the reason is just time. It might even be that in the patch that we do deliver, that some of those other ones are already done. It's just that because the video had to be made last week, and we were like, are we gonna, we knew we would get time to sort out the Arbiter, and we were like, we don't know if we're going to get time to do the others, so we'll just promise that one, and then if the others come, then that's just a bonus. Yeah, effectively, there's a little bit of trickiness around each one to just work out all the states of everything. If you're looking at just as a random example, and this isn't obviously that big of a deal, but it's just someone has to do it. Is for the breach one, for example, we have to decide okay, so we can't really let you have the economy, you can't reset the whole map because then you'd get the drops from the breach a second time. So then it's okay, we have to make sure we put a checkpoint in the thing, and that means we have to do some someone has to go write some code to like make the breach thing work correctly for checkpoints, and it's just like random stuff like that, just little details that just mean that like it'll take a little bit longer to do those other ones. But I mean, we're not talking a really long time, right? We're just like someone will get to it in the next couple of weeks. It's just
I'd say King in the Mist. King in the Mist will almost certainly be done because it's an isolated boss fight in a room with nothing else going on.
Yeah.
But for the logbook and for the breach one, you have to have some manual intervention, and we have to really make sure that there's none of that like respawn at checkpoint at this exact point in time, and all of a sudden you get the loot again kind of thing going on, because that obviously can be quite destructive.
So it's literally just a time thing. We'll, as I said, we'll do it in the next couple of weeks, just as we get these things going.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Speaking of Arbiter, a couple questions related to Citadels here, just some fast ones. Are Copper Citadels really the same spawn rate as all the others? That's what happened.
I mean, we generated a bunch of Atlas state and checked that they were equivalent. I mean, I don't know what to so we really were not intending to make a Monopoly game, McDonald's Monopoly game style thing here. It really was intended to be equal. So yeah, as far as we could tell, it was just the just that the boss had that exploding minion thing that like was the damage just busted on that?
Nah, well, maybe, but all of his little attached zombies, like during the phase 1 of the fight, they, when he summons the sandstorm and you get protected, and you have the zombies coming at you, they blow up after they die. And in the map version, the in-game version of this fight, some logic was missing. I don't know what happened, and those would then explode at the end of the phase 2. So you're like, oh, I killed him. You run in to get your loot, and 8 zombies just explode and insta-kill you. And so what you found is a whole bunch of people were just straight up like succeeding at the fight and then just dying straight afterwards. So that accounted for some portion of it. And then he was just harder. Certainly the death rate, even excluding the one-shotting zombies, was just much, much higher than the other two. But yeah, we have now a cheat that generates or simulates generating like, I think it's 1 billion different blocks, and calculates how many of every map spawned and everything like that, just to test this specific Citadel case. And everything we could find generates exactly the correct amount of the 3 things. So
speaking
the
of
3 Citadels.
Speaking of spawning Citadels, did you guys happen to catch any of the conspiracy theories related to corpses pointing in directions, etc.?
It was so ridiculous. Whatever. People come up with crazy things. I don't know.
All right.
I can tell you. I see. The thing is, I'm tempted to actually do something weird like that now, just to just to bait the conspiracies. But no, there was nothing weird going on.
It's just RNG. Like you have to. I did catch
it's
the
just
video.
RNG. That's all it is.
It said closer to the centers, so there is something to being farther away from your spawn point.
So but basically all that is literally just that there where you start, there's just a radius you have to get to before they start spawning. But after that point, it's just they just spawn the same rate.
RNG.
And we just moved it closer just because since you can't really tell like where that's like not obvious, right? And the main thing we want to do there is just not have a Citadel spawn like right next to where you start, because that'd be ridiculous. Effectively we just shrunk that down a bit because it was a little bit large. And then the other thing as well is that now that you can see them in the fog, it actually makes them so much easier to find. That we actually intended, we were like, oh yeah, we're going to totally buff the number of these that there are. But after we made the change to seeing them in the fog, it was immediately like, oh shit, there's actually tons of these everywhere. We just weren't seeing them before. Seeing them makes a big difference.
Okay, so moving on, off the topic of Arbiter instead of those here. It mentioned in the video less bad mods on mobs. Can we get some more detail?
Sorry, it wasn't mobs. I think because it was in the item section, and maybe you misheard that slightly. But the bad mods thing was talking about items. So effectively, there's some stuff going on here. So effectively, what we did, because a lot of people were talking about issues with higher tier rares as you get to harder content. And effectively, when we sort of looked into this, we sort of worked out like there were some anomalies around like what happens when mods get cut out on the lower levels, just based on kind of like somewhat random things about like how many top tier mods there are of certain types and things like that. So what we've done is it's not like huge changes, but we've kind of effectively done things like I think accuracy went down a little bit, and there was like I can't remember the other changes.
Accuracy went down, life on kill, mana on kill on weapons at least, and then attributes on hybrid gear.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, the hybrid gear attributes. And then there was also the bug where effectively high tier rares weren't getting the ability to generate top T1 mods of certain types, which I don't think it was actually necessarily as big of a deal as what people might have assumed, but because it wouldn't have affected that many items, but we have fixed it. So, for example, it was just impossible on a T5 bow to ever get attack speed.
Once it was a certain item level.
Once it was a certain item level. So yeah,
This
but
crafting
you
bug
couldn't even
doesn't
get
affect
T5
us, I don't
realistically,
think.
except from high level stuff,
Ah,
right?
you
But
still
whatever, you still
occasionally
could
should,
occasionally,
yeah.
but whatever. The point is like there was a few things like that were going on, and we've effectively just adjusted that stuff, and it should result in generally better rares when you're talking about like high end, like high tier stuff. So we'll just sort of see how that works out. The adjustments are not like mega, but they are there, and they should sort of improve things, I think, a little bit.
And just for clarity's sake for the viewers, when you say top tier, like tier 1, you actually mean like tier 12 or whatever the top tier is, right? Because tier 1 technically is the worst tier.
Sorry, yeah, it's so annoying that we have like tiers going in reverse directions in different contexts. Like, yes. What I mean is whatever the top tier of that mod is. In some cases, it was getting cut out. In fact, I worry that even in the article that we're going to say that's actually incorrect. So I just need to fix that because I think in the article that we posted, it says T1 item affixes, which is actually backwards. So I need to go and fix that after we've done this.
We also need to make this consistent everywhere and sort this tiered situation out.
Yeah,
I do have a follow-up on that.
Yeah.
It is sometimes very frustrating dropping something that has a high tier, but I don't know if that is the highest tier. Would it be possible? Like, is there something you guys are considering adding?
I think we are adding a thing that displays on the mod if it is the best tier relatively soon. But again, we need to also just figure out a little bit more around this because we've got this whole T1 versus T
the reason why there is resistance to having T1 mean the top one is because then if we add another one later, it changes what all the tiers are, and there was sort of some discomfort around that. But then maybe it's still better to just do that anyway. I don't know. That was the original thinking behind that, but whatever. It might be less confusing if T1 meant no, because the thing is, the other thing as well is that map tiers are like the T1 is the bottom one again, and you certainly wouldn't want to reverse that. That would be weird. So yeah, I don't know. Like probably,
enough.
Yeah, whatever. This is just a random small topic, but just one of those things.
Understood.
Yeah.
Speaking of items and quality, one of the most requested additions, item filters, coming to console. So I'm sure many people are very excited about that. Speaking of the topic of consoles, can we expect more quality of life things coming to console? For instance, I very commonly see asked for things like text UI size, etc. Do you have any plans related to quality of life improvements for console?
Yeah, I mean, we certainly need to do more there. I mean, I don't have any specific things to announce there, but effectively we need to make sure that that experience is good. And one thing that I know, this isn't actually technically a console thing, but another thing that we will be doing for people who use controller soon is like the ability to fast swap between controller and the PC UI just by like immediately in game, because that's something
what I want.
I believe there was even an implementation of that. It was just a little bit too dodgy to release on early access start. So we just need to get that sorted and then test and so that'll be another one. But in terms of just general console stuff, I mean, look, there's just more we can do, right? And we've got our guys on console. They'll be looking into these things and just making changes. The text size one, I do think needs some addressing. It's a little bit tricky because there's kind of a lot of things all through the game that need like futzing around with. So that I definitely appreciate that. And like part of that is literally because when we're this is kind of bad, but it's like in the studio, we literally have like a big screen and the couch that's near it is like relatively close. It's like an actual real world scenario. People often sit a bit further away, and we probably should have been thinking about that. Yes. Things like that just need some addressing for sure.
Fair enough.
All right. Putting aside bugs and tuning that is expected for early access state, there was a question that I was asking about what are the players' feedback that surprised you guys the most?
Well, I know you were saying, I mean, I guess from my perspective, it's like we had a lot of worries about things being broken. We just didn't know what those things were going to be. But then you were saying before that just the level of brokenness did surprise you as far as like some character builds and stuff, right?
I had my whole okay, obviously people are going to find broken builds, but like we escaped millions into tens of millions, and then we escaped tens of millions into hundreds of millions in measuring in DPS, and then we escaped DPS into comets per second, and then like you got to this point where it's like, okay, we're just off the reservation here in terms of just you know, when you 1 week in and someone's like, here's my 450 million DPS build that hits the pinnacle boss for 141 million damage and one shots in the 3-player party, and I'm like, oh, well, where are we? Like, what happened?
The thing that I found a little bit sad, and I guess we should have just expected this, is that like I sort of expected that the first few times people were playing the pinnacle boss, that would kind of be a normal fight. But in reality, the first few times people played the pinnacle boss was just completely like a disaster because like they just had some build that was because to get to the pinnacle boss the fastest, you also had to have like a ridiculously broken thing going on, and so you just ended up with just like like you don't even get to see the mechanics, and it was just like that was a bit sad to me.
Yeah,
well,
I've never
hopefully with
seen the
more
pinnacle boss
lives, people
mechanics.
will actually be giving it a shot instead of just selling it off to those people who do one shot it. But we'll see how that goes. But
I mean, the tricky thing about this has just been that, like, okay, so we do generally want to not do mid-league nerfs, and there was a period there before Christmas where we were making some changes, but we weren't even considering those to be mid-league nerfs because they still left things in a state that was still like very, very good. Like from our perspective, and like maybe the players would disagree with this, it was kind of like when we nerfed something there, we were still leaving it in a state where it's still some of the best shit ever. And so from our perspective, we were like, well, there'd be no reason to have to re-roll your character after this change because like it's still crazy. So we didn't even really consider those to be mid-league nerfs in the same way. But then, obviously, there's going to have to be some changes because, like, you know, there are just certain things that are just completely ridiculous. But one thing we've got now, and I kind of mentioned it in the video, is that, like, we actually have an understanding now of, like, what a character should look like. And so ideally, when we do our first, like, true balance patch, we should be at the point where we can be like, okay, here's like these like 10 things that need to come down, but then there's also like these other 50 things that need to come up to get to that point, right? So like ideally it sort of there should be a little bit of leveling there that occurs, but we really don't want to do that kind of patch without doing an economy reset because we actually need like to see what really happens when you get a new economy and all that sort of stuff. So, and when I say an economy reset, of course, what I mean is a new league. Like you'll still have the old characters if you want to play them, but all the stuff we're going to be looking at will be on the new economy that you know, in terms of like how it evolves that way. So yeah, that's going to be a tricky one. It'll take us a little bit longer. But that is also what we're working on in the background as well, is just like getting all of this stuff to where it needs to be.
So am I hearing that there's no nerfs coming in this patch then? Is that sort of what I'm taking from this?
I mean, there might be a few that relate to things that are just completely screwed, but I don't, I mean, it is not our intention to do a big nerf patch here. Like, that is not our goal. Our goal with this is, like, fix things that are annoying people and, like, make the game more playable. Whereas the goal of, like, the sort of balance patch that's coming a little later would be like, okay, we'll have a new economy. We'll actually do like a proper balance pass where we get all of that stuff like more.
Because you scared everyone with that executioner photo in the Twitter post. I mean, it looked like the guillotine was about to drop.
Okay, yeah, people look into things, I think, a little bit too much. Okay,
there's kind of three kinds of nerfs going on. Not on this patch. Just hold on.
I do want to follow up though with the comment on the balance patch coming later, and you want to combine that with a economy reset. So is that you saying that there will be economy resets during early access on a regular basis?
Yeah, so there won't be. They'll be in a new league, so you still get to keep your old characters. But effectively, yeah, absolutely during early access there'll be new. Leagues. What I don't want to say is like whether or not the league so when I use the word league, people sort of assume that means there's like a league mechanic that comes along with it, and we might do that or we might not. We kind of need to work out what's going on there, but it'll be a new league in the sense that it's a new economy that people can play through, and we'll be introducing significant stuff that would want people to make people replay as well as doing all the balance stuff and lots of stuff. But effectively, we need to do that because you can't really just make changes to balance like significant ones without screwing people's characters over, obviously. So you need to have some kind of thing like that in order to be able to do that.
Just going back quickly, we have a kind of few classifications of things we do address when it does impact balance, and we are trying to be ultra conservative, but if it is bricking instances, as in it is just absolutely tanking instances, affecting the performance and thus affecting the performance for other users, we almost always have to address it. You can't just let that be. Now we obviously try and reduce the impact on the server, generally because of some sort of infinite loop or anything of the sort like that,
that's getting nerfed.
Something happening per frame that shouldn't happen, and all of a sudden now,
like if you're getting the server frame rate to be like 1 FPS, then that is not alright, right?
Yeah.
Like we have to actually sort that. So that is something that we will do a mid-league nerf to address, but ideally in such a way where it still leaves the build perfectly viable.
Yeah.
It's just that it's no longer completely destroying what's going on.
The other things where it does nerf and has an impact is, of course, when there is simply something clearly not working intended. So, like an example of that, which I won't try and pronounce, but the shield that increases effect of your socketed runes and soul cores, and that was just obviously applying to all of them, not the one socketed in itself. That is obviously a nerf. It was never meant to work that way. I don't think that really surprises anyone when that gets changed. It's very clearly not working as intended. So those two we're generally just going to pull the trigger on almost always. Right. We're still thinking like, okay, especially in the performance case, that's like blatantly, our fault, and there is economy there, and then obviously there are people who are going to lose their character builds because of it. Maybe, hopefully not. We try and obviously bring down the frequency or the infinite loop element or the per frame while also buffing the damage, and then we make a note of it to like reassess this later when there's a new economy, and we'll come back and reassess that. But often protecting the instances, protecting the server performance for other users, and obviously fixing bugs are something we're going to do, and so that can have an impact. But just like at this point, preferably for all the other main nerfs where you're just blatantly nerfing someone's build or nerfing a build, we're trying to currently push that towards the economy / league reset kind of point. Yeah.
All right. It's a very extensive answer. I appreciate that. That's one of the things that makes this very fun for us to do. We ask a question, then we just lean back and let you guys do your thing. I love it. We are going to circle back to what you mentioned as well earlier, Mark. You said coming back to reassess a decision that's been made. And the topic we're going to open up is the two-step verification, security for accounts with certain things that's happened recently.
I forgot about this.
So the real question that we come down to with everything that's going down is, I guess the first one is, was there a data breach at GGG?
All right.
And following that up with, are you going to reassess the decision of two-step verification?
This is a good question.
All right. So this is unfortunately really sucks, and I was really hoping we'd get a post about this before we did this interview, but unfortunately we haven't quite finished assessing yet. So there has been a situation where someone got access to an admin account on our website, and we now understand how that happened. And we also understand, we don't fully understand the scope of everything that occurred here, but we're sort of in the process of like looking at logs and so on. And there was a few really shitty things that occurred here that I'm very unhappy about. So the first one, just to say this, is that the thing that happened here was actually kind of the same thing that happened a while ago when through a Steam, effectively a Steam account was compromised through Steam support. So effectively what happened is one of our administrator accounts had a Steam account associated with it. And this was a Steam account that the person who had it attached didn't really kind of know. I mean, obviously they could have checked, but like they didn't really consider the fact that this was like this old Steam account that they don't even use anymore was attached to their admin account. And so effectively what happened was that got compromised through Steam support. So I don't know like all the details exactly what happens there, but effectively what happens is that like they are able to somehow provide like details that they managed to find on someone, like the last 4 digits of their credit card information or whatever, they get through some other kind of means, and then they provide enough information to Steam support where they're able to get Steam to change the credentials on the account, which happened without us noticing, because once again this was an account that this person doesn't log into, so there was no they didn't realize that this has occurred. And then another thing. This was compounded by the fact, and this one was really, really crap, that whenever a customer support person makes a change to an account, they there's like an audit log, right, of like all the actions, like the events that they've done. And this effectively means that like when we investigate like, hey, what's happening with this account that got compromised, like we obviously look at the events and see like, hey, was there anything, like what happened here, right? Did someone change a password? Was something going on with that? And there was actually a bug where the event for setting a new password on an account was incorrectly in the back end labeled as a note rather than like an audit event. And what that meant was that notes are things that like customer service can add to people's accounts, and they can edit them and delete them. And so the password change thing being a note could be deleted by a customer service person accidentally rather than being rather than being permanently there in a way that no one could change. And so that effectively meant that what was happening is the person who managed to get an account, they were compromising the accounts by setting a random password, then deleting the node afterwards to say that that had happened. And so when we would look at accounts, we just wouldn't see this. And so it was like really not obvious to us that what was going on there. So I don't have like full information yet about exactly the extent of everything that happened, but what I can tell you is that 66 notes were deleted. So that would imply that 66 accounts were compromised. Now, it does extend slightly back further than what our log history is. So I think there's like, so we only keep logs for 30 days. And that's like a whole, privacy rules around that stuff means that that's your log retention. Now, there were 5 days before that where the account was compromised, but this is all pre-launch of PoE 2. So effectively, there were the 5 days back in November when we don't have logs for, and then after that point, there were 66 accounts that were that had notes deleted. Now, the reason why I am using that phraseology here is because the things were deleted from the frickin' event stream, like we literally don't know what happened here. Like the only thing I've got to go by is the web server logs, which don't actually record like, all the data that's sent in a web request. It's just like the address of the page they went to, right? So effectively we can see like basic information, but because the thing itself that they were doing involved deleting the frickin' records of the fact that they were doing it, meant that like, yes, it's unfortunately very difficult for us to track down full information about this. Now, we are going to be posting a post with like all the information that we can possibly gather that we're sort of still gathering. And we were obviously initially very afraid that there'd been some kind of larger data breach here where like they would somehow had access to our servers or something like that was going on. Like because we had no idea initially, right? So we're kind of like, oh shit, what the hell's going on here? But now that we've understood that the vector was via a Steam account like that, it kind of means that like effectively what they had access to was the same stuff that customer service had access to, and all of that stuff is logged except this one thing that was not like logged due to this other thing. And then since then we've also added a bunch of extra security stuff that honestly should have already been in place around this to sort this out. So all of that is to say that we totally fucked up here with like security stuff on this account. Like we're certainly not going to have any Steam accounts linked to, like we're going to audit, make sure that there's no Steam accounts linked to any customer service admin accounts any longer. Like that certainly needs to not happen if there's going to be this kind of attack vector. As well as we've added a few other measures that, to just make sure that this sort of shit doesn't happen again. All of that really, really sucks. And especially because, like, as I said, just due to the fact that the stuff about it is deleted, we can't, like, easily find out what even frickin' happened. So there's going to be more investigation and working out what's happening here. But, that seems to be what occurred.
So just to quickly, for the people that are going to give it like a quick recap, this was a social engineering breach. This was not like a server-side data breach of an admin account. And this is a one-off, one account. It's now a closed case scenario. The viewers do not have to do anything on their side to worry about their information.
So the moment that we realized that something had gone wrong, we just immediately reset all the passwords on all the admin accounts and deleted all the sessions just to make sure that everything was kosher. So from that moment on, there was no more like accounts getting compromised or anything like that.
Sure.
And then now it's just been a matter of us like doing a bunch of log analysis, and it's actually quite like. Because the only way we've got it is the web logs, and it's taking a while just to process all the stuff, and there's obviously a lot of human investigation. Like we just haven't yet been able to prepare a full report about it, but we are going to be posting one hopefully in the next day or two that has all of the stuff about that. But that was just really, really crappy.
We're gonna get
so then going back to the actual question about two-factor authentication, I mean, in this particular case, it wouldn't have actually helped because it was compromised through our frickin' support interface, right? Except for that, probably it would have helped in the sense that if we had added if there was two-factor auth, presumably the bug about where it didn't get logged when someone changed it wouldn't have applied to that because, it's a new thing that they wouldn't have had the same bug for. So I suppose it would have helped in that sense. But that's the thing with that. So then talking about two-factor auth. So first of all, I'm completely not against two-factor auth in any regard. The only issue with it is that it's easy to implement two-factor auth. What is hard to implement is all the policy around how to recover when people inevitably lose their second factor. And so that's the kind of tricky part to actually deal with. It's kind of one of those things where we will do it, but we're just not quite prepared yet to be able to do it with all the customer support stuff we would have to do. And it's kind of one of those annoyingly deep holes of someone loses their password, what do you do to verify it? The two-factor auth thing, what do you do to verify this? And it's like, okay, so now you start to have to worry about what personal information can they give you? And then now it's storing personal information. And then what's the GDPR implications of that? And there's just it's just a whole rabbit hole of just random policy stuff that all kind of comes around to that stuff. Effectively, What I will tell you is that we're immediately going to add two-factor auth to all of our support accounts. You can bet on that. And that is not a problem. That is not a problem for us to do there, because the policy around that is like, well, you just like walk in person to the frickin' guy. If you lose it, then you can physically deal with that, right? So that one is how we sort it out. But as I said, we will get to it, and it is a serious thing. We definitely want to have this. It's just a question of just getting it done, really, like all the policy stuff around it and all of the like. Yeah, just as I said, it's all support nightmare around how to deal with it.
Well, I appreciate the extremely vocal transparency about what's going on. I'm sure lots of people here watching appreciate that as well, and we won't grill you about it or anything. So appreciate that information. We'll move on here to a little bit more fun topic, which is upcoming content for the game. So we've been asked, one of the most common questions we've had here is things like roadmap for cadence of releases. You know, you guys originally stated 6 to 12 months for full release, which begs the question, how many leagues between? There's 6 classes, so if it's 6 months, it's 1 class a month. You know where I'm going with this. So, can we expect any information in terms of the cadence of releases, upcoming things like weapons, classes, skill gems, etc.?
Right. So the cadence we want to hit is sort of something similar to the kind of league cadence that we've done before for PoE 1. So like that's like, I think that it works. Things work the best when you've kind of got like like releases that are fairly large, that like have a significant amount of stuff in them to actually bring people back and play and so on. So you can kind of expect a similar thing like that. For the actual like what is going to be in each release, obviously I'm not going to talk about that because we'll save that for the live stream and all that sort of stuff. But effectively, yeah, I mean like that's kind of what you can expect. That being said, there's also a thing where like so we want to be able to do the balance patch addressing the balance issues that we've talked about as soon as we can. But in order to do a patch like that, you need to have enough content in it to be able to make sure that people actually come back and play it and like that sort of thing as well. Like you need to be able to make enough changes and like add enough content that it's actually exciting. So we're going to work towards getting a like a PoE 2 sort of new league with new content in it basically as soon as we possibly can. So we're like I can't exactly say a date or anything, but like we're gonna rush for it, right? Like we're gonna really try and do it because we want to get to that point of stability of the balance that we're sort of happier with as soon as we can as well. So as I said, not going to say a date, but basically just. Look, we work reasonably fast. We're going to try and get it out as quick as we can. Hopefully we get that relatively soon for you guys.
What do you guys think? 1 month from now?
Okay.
So I'm just going to go ahead and assume that the new act is going to be involved in this. But I guess a little extra question to that when we talk about Act 4, 5, 6.
I think it'll be 1.
Is the plans to add like 1 act, or are you guys?
Yeah. So this is honestly. This is honestly one of the freaking hardest questions ever, right? Like this is actually something that we've discussed back and forth so many times because
league means
like
everything resets.
If you're talking about it from a pure storyline perspective and like kind of what makes sense, so there would be so imagine we release 1 act, right? It's like how does it fit exactly into having the leveling? Like, do you go like 1, 2, 3, 4 and then like 1, 2 again? Like that'd be kind of weird. Or like 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 3, or like. Do you have Act 4? You can also play Act 1 or Act 4, or like like it's kind of just weird,
you won't
right?
Lose
and like
this character, it's like a
so like from that perspective,
league.
It's like we should do them all at once, like at some point. But then on the other hand, we're like, okay, if we don't release the Acts 1 at a time, then that kind of means like all the content from that we're sort of busy having to work on, we still have to have good releases, right? And so that means we have to have like more stuff in what we do release if it doesn't contain an act. So there's kind of this like complicated like puzzle around this, and it's like. And what we kind of thought, like, there are issues around this, but effectively we're like, okay, well, we're going to have to make Act 4. We have to be making Act 4 in the background right now anyway, right? So we don't technically have to decide what we're doing about this, like, right now. So, like, that's sort of happening anyway. So I guess that is to say that, like, there's still a lot of argument about this fact. And it's honestly such a hard one because I don't think there's a really great answer. Like,
if you don't
releasing the Acts 1 at a time would be making content so much easier because we get to immediately utilize all the stuff from that act to like make other content. Like it'll be so much, and like also it just immediately makes a release feel really big, right? So like that would be something that we could do, and it also would be good for our studio because like there's this phenomenon that always happens where like. You say, okay, this is when we're making this thing, but if people are not actually going to play it, then like people have a different definition of finished from like, oh, people are actually going to play this versus like it just has to be ready internally, So like for just a production perspective, like I feel like the game will get made faster if we do release the acts, just because it forces us to actually release them and like forces everyone to get it into a really playable state. But yeah, on the other hand, as I said, there's like all these kind of like practical issues with it. So
Damned if you do,
yeah.
damned if you don't, huh?
Yeah, I know it's a bit of a tough one. So yeah, I mean, I guess the answer to that is still to come, and we just need to work out what we feel about this one way or the other. So yeah, I guess you'll see
this
when
better?
we do our next when we do our next announcement what we've kind of come up with. But yeah, as I said, in the meantime, it's not like we don't have to just make Act 4 anyway right now in the background. So that's yeah, they're continuing to do that as well as all the people on the more sort of balancey side of things working on balance, which will get shipped much earlier. Yeah.
All right. Let's just move on to the next topic to make sure we actually cover these questions. We have a long list.
Sure.
So we're going to talk about a can of worms called State of Magic Find. Now, the perception has been one thing. And I mean, shout out to Slippery Jim for the absolute insanity that he goes through, which is kind of showing that it's
I don't think audience is
So,
getting nerfed,
what do you
though.
guys think about Magic Find?
It's still dropping the same amount.
This is a very
It's the
tricky.
omens are
What
getting
I will
dropped
say to start with is that like
more.
the way the Magic Find formula works in PoE 2 is literally identical to how it was in PoE 1 as far as diminishing returns and everything is concerned.
Yes, they are.
The difference is just down to what rarity is giving you as opposed to what it was giving you in PoE 1. Our argument for why Magic Find should be fine in PoE 2 is effectively like we're not doing what happened in PoE 1 where you got like all these quantity mods and all that sort of stuff like that. Like it's effectively the Magic Find in PoE 2 is what PoE 1 had back when PoE 1 was first released, right? Where it was kind of like, and it kind of was fine then. So the argument was, well, why shouldn't it not be fine now? I guess there's another, like compounding with this, there's another contingent of people who would say that like anything at all that affects item drops should just not be a thing at all. And which is like a position you can take. And I don't know that I necessarily, agree with that position, but like you know, it's another position you can take. So I guess all of that really is to say that like I don't think there's anything about it that's not working as it's intended to work. And ultimately, the purpose of something like Magic Find is to kind of give you another axis of build design beyond just like doing the most DPS, which you know, like that's kind of its ultimate goal. So yeah, but I mean that's kind of where it's at really. There's definitely more to look into here though. I don't know if you've got a different opinion.
Not really. I was just thinking the main difference between, say, PoE 1 was you fully saturate into every single item being a unique item.
That's the difference.
Whereas in PoE 2, you saturate into higher tier rares. You actually cannot fully saturate into unique items. It is impossible. So yeah, it certainly holds different value. I don't know how. But then again, I suspect a lot of the audience who are finding Magic Find to be a problem would find it a problem in both games, which, again, completely fair perspective to take. I don't know. There's a little bit more to look into here for sure. Like we come back from holiday and we're like, all right, let's fix everything we can in a week. There's this list of like 100 things and we pick the most, what we think is the most impactful 10. And so, yeah, there's a lot of these things that are just outlying on a list for us to really actually look into and investigate more and see, you know, what part of it people are liking and not liking. Because, you know, even though you had Slippery Jim do this, you know, the great service. There'll be a lot of people who just disagree with that. He says it's fine. There'll be a lot of people who disagree with him as well. So yeah, we just need to look into this a bit more honestly to get a better conclusion. But personally speaking, I don't think it's a problem currently. But I might change my mind as well upon reading all of this and looking into it more. So we'll see how it goes.
So a follow-up.
I don't know if you. Okay.
Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. You can continue.
No, you go for it.
Sure. So a follow-up to this is okay. So the state of Magic Find is a question. Specifically, do you have a belief on how you believe it's influenced the economy? I'm seeing a lot of comments sometimes when I'm live where people are like Magic Find's the reason, inflation's the thing, etc. So what is your guys' belief in terms of how much Magic Find is actually making an impact in the current economy?
It's 10% more loot at 100%.
Difference in PoE 1 actually, of course, is that Magic Find now increases the tiers of currency you find.
Yes.
Which,
I don't honestly think that we have an informed enough opinion on this topic, actually, to be fair. Yeah, like I don't think it's been our primary concern like this week because of the fact that like there's other things that we think, you know, like we really wanted to make sure that the actual play experience is prioritized as the main thing. Like that's the kind of, you know, our focus right now, which I mean, obviously this affects it, but it's kind of like something where like it's a slightly longer term concern. So it's something we need to definitely investigate more. But yeah, it was really like that map playability and like making sure that, because like, I mean, when people are dying to things that they think are bullshit and stuff like that, that's kind of like something that we were more concerned about. So yeah, that's,
no nerfs.
I would say we need to definitely do more.
Spark is
we need to form an opinion about this before we can say more about it, I think.
How about I phrase the question like this then? In PoE 1, item quantity was removed, which affected currency. In PoE 2, you now bake that into
Yeah, I see what
rarity.
you mean. Yep, that's a very good
What
point.
is the reasoning for reintroducing quantity that you made a decision to remove in PoE 1?
I don't think that we looked at that as reintroducing quantity. But you are correct that it does increase the quantity. Well, okay, it's not that it increases the quantity of
No
currency.
nerfs.
It increases the type, the tier of the currency you get, which you would look at that as quantity because like you don't care about like whatever transmutes are
and
dropping.
augments
You only
become-
care about the higher ones, and so as far as you're concerned, that is quantity. So I would say we just didn't really look at that as quantity, but you're not wrong about that, right? That is true.
Well,
Yeah,
it's certainly going to be a problem if it is perceived as that having enough rarity is the only way to thus have enough currency to say roll your maps effectively
sure.
and also have enough to spend on gear and whatnot. Like
Right.
that's certainly a problem. In which case, some adjustments probably likely do need to be made. But again, we're just speculating now. We need to look into this a heck of a lot more in order to get an actual informed decision there.
That's fair. I do have one last follow-up on it, and it's a discussion we had 4 or 5 years ago with Chris Wilson, and the topic was actually about currency drop as well. And the comment was that
Where's Chris
the
Wilson
numbers look
nowadays?
fine on GGG's side. The numbers looks fine. It is accurate. You are dropping more currency than ever.
Is he retired?
But the numbers didn't matter when the perception in the community is the direct opposite. So how do you think about tackling that specific conversation when the perception is completely opposite to what's seemingly the reality of things, right?
So are you saying that the community perception is that currency doesn't drop enough?
It's the perception is that rarity is a mandatory stat.
Oh, sure.
because of the
No, yeah,
pseudo
well,
quantity.
absolutely, right? Like, look, if the community feels that way, we should absolutely look into it and do more about it, right? Like, but bear in mind that, yeah, I sort of often say, like when the community has a problem, this is an invitation for us to understand the problem and then for us to address it in the way we want to address it. And that way isn't necessarily exactly what the community is saying, but it's just effectively like, I do want to keep doing things until the community is no longer unhappy about it. But that may not necessarily look exactly like in the form that they're expecting, if you know what I mean. So yeah, we have to look more into this. That's absolutely the case, right? And we can tell that because of the fact that people are unhappy. So yeah, we will look into more into it.
So, speaking of unhappy, we're going to get into state of melee / maces is the next portion of the questions here. So, let's talk about warrior and maces. What are your guys' feelings currently on the state of maces? How do you want mace skills in particular to function in Path of Exile 2? Obviously, they're very long cast times. Movement of mobs can be very quick. You can get stunned, interrupted. On the tree as well, there's many nodes that literally reduce like attack speed in order to gain other things. So more or less, warriors in a position where a lot of the people feel like it's clunky, too slow for the current in-game play loop. Or warrior feels like maybe the first class designed when the vision of PoE 2 was fairly slow. So what is your guys' response as to the state of mace skills, and where would you like to take it?
Well, our first question I would have for you is, do you think it's a problem during campaign or only in endgame?
I would say it is more specifically a problem in an exponential ramping as you continue the game until you hit a point where there's pinnacle bosses, and then you can kind of one-shot pinnacle bosses with some of the setups currently. So there's a mid portion of the middle to later in-game in which it feels like a problem, specifically because you have things like volatiles that actually track you, and if you stay in position, you're heavily punished. So it seems counterintuitive to the design of some of the mobs.
I do think that there is a problem in game here. I'm not exactly sure what we need to do about it yet, though. I'm glad to hear you say that it's an in-game issue and not a campaign issue, because I have to say that my experience playing Warrior through campaign is actually that it's fine. But I did hear a bunch of people talking about that as if that was not fine, and I think that it is. Like, I think, or at least I can't reproduce the issue during campaign if that's the case. So really, it is more of an in-game issue, and I don't know that I've got a solution for you right now. But we do need to, like, once again, it's one of those more subtle things that we need to look into, and I suspect that the big balance patch will be looking at that a lot more. There is something about the warrior that doesn't scale in the same way that some of the other classes do, I believe. But that we sort of need to understand what the other classes end up looking like as well a little bit to understand that as well. I don't know if you've got any more different opinions about that.
Well, I mean, the attack speed is a big part of it, right? You obviously have, that is a multiplicative axis that every other cast speed or attack speed is a multiplicative axis every other, or I guess comet trigger speed that every other class is getting, and the warrior has a deficiency in that. And even if you were to get it, yes, obviously there's the fixed attack times which don't scale. It's probably a combination of those are too punishing, or there's too much of them, and there's not enough attack speed available. It'll be somewhere in that region for sure where we have to make some adjustments, and it probably won't even be that drastic to get it to feel right. And of course, like, it is easy to compare it to, especially, I know you said more like late mid to mid end game thing, but like when you look at the like top end, it's very easy to compare it to the absolute insanity that is, like, you know, Pillar of the Cage God with Hoa and all of that, which is just ridiculous right now. It's very easy to compare it to that and be like, well, Warrior will never be viable. But there are also a lot of quite good end game warriors that are certainly being played, and you know, I don't want to certainly make it seem like it's completely useless. And I mean people using maces, not just people who are doing it for the ascendancies.
Karn's a notable example. He's like level 99 in SSF, but he's having to use the Herald of Ice tech, which is very highly speculative to be nerfed, right, in order to make it feel good. So while I would agree there's people that are doing it, I would also argue there are people that are doing it as a masochist in order to be like, I'm a warrior guy, I'm going to do it regardless.
There are also others, maybe not that advanced and not that far up in terms of her level. But yeah, sure, understood. Like, it's certainly on the weaker end at the end game, like, without question. That being said, I don't think it would take too much to get it there. But yeah, again, it's part of this massive balance, you know, recalibration we need to do now that we've seen the state of everything. Right. Warrior or mace skills are certainly on the ones where you're going to do a lot more bringing up than you're going to do bringing down. You know, aside from things like, you know, the Hammer of the Gods, just in one shot with bleed and then the boss is dead and you don't do anything, right? You get those anomalies out there where it's like, yeah, they're going to die in one shot no matter what. You know, things like that aren't going to be buffed necessarily, but
fair enough.
There is more to buff in the mace spectrum than there is in most of the other things, I'd say, yes.
So that answers the offensive spectrum for the warrior. Now let's talk about the defensive. And one of the things in the reveal video was armor, for instance, is getting fixed and or buffed, I should say, and we'll talk about that in a moment.
I wouldn't. One of the reasons we didn't dwell on that too much is because I wouldn't want people to think that that's more of a change than it is. Like, we are doing a bit of a buff to armor, but it's not like the hugest deal. I think there is more we have to do. Like, there's more complicated stuff we have to do with armor, I think, to make it more interesting. But there's a lot of arguments about this. One, because it is like, yeah, I'll just say that there's a lot of arguments about like how exactly this should be addressed. One concern that we have, which is probably totally out of left field as far as what the players would say, is that we don't think that there's enough of a difference between the big hit and the small hit. There's a number in the formula that is different in PoE 1 than it is in PoE 2 that results in the armor being... The difference between a small hit and a big hit in PoE 2 and PoE 1, it matters more in PoE 1. But in addition to that, so we actually think that PoE 2 might be wrong in this regard and we need to change it. But in addition to that, there's also a thing that's happened where like white monsters can hit harder in PoE 1 and PoE 2 than they did in PoE 1, and that means that the thing that armor is supposed to like, because like part of the intention with armor is it's like, okay, like when you're talking about like big boss hits, like it has less of an effect than what it would have off like a bunch of small hits, but sometimes the small hits from a white mob are not even that different from what a boss hits you with, and so this is actually meaning that the sort of the idea of armor being based on the damage hit is kind of got like a few issues that we have to deal with. So I don't know if you've got any more thoughts on this particular topic, but it is like something that we have to sort of worry about a little bit.
Yeah. It's again one of these things I mean, I hate coming in here so unequipped, but again, it's just the timing with the holiday and all that, with all these things where it's like, have to look into, but that is the nature of it. I mean, especially once there's an actual released product, it's like a good, 50% of our time goes into having to investigate and look into live operations problems like this.
So we are buffing a little bit of armor a little bit in this patch for like to because there are some issues there. But honestly, the full solution for armor is going to have to be more complicated, and we're going to have to sort of work out some stuff around it. It's there's definitely something that I think there was another thing as well, is that like the other defenses tend to have like extra mechanics that are easier to access than what armor has. Which is another sort of side thing, which is like not entirely obvious when you're designing it initially.
We have shock siphon for
so
ES.
It might be that there's more like supplementary things that the armor, like that strength characters effectively need to have around defense, and so like stuff like that can kind of matter a lot. So
Like Wind Dance is universally just better than Scavenge Plating, as an example, if those are meant to be paired. One is just like you have it, and the other is I have to armor break, and then on bosses it's much harder to sustain. So we've made changes there, of course. We did buff the armor. I'd say it's obviously hard because of the big hit, small hit, but it's probably in the like 15% more effective kind of region. Our changes in 011. And then, yeah, a lot of it is also like, okay, if you consider, that evasion also applies to damage mitigation from Invoker. You got a lot of things going on with acrobatics, which turns evasion into arguably, I mean, sure, it penalizes your evasion, but like it then kind of gives you almost as much PDR against certain hits as a lot of armor, and then you have a lot of very, very strong defensive, with Grim Feast and Energy Shield. And so, like, it's not only armor is weak, it's also that evasion and Energy Shield have some extreme strongs that are going on. Not to say
he's hinting that they're
going to
nerf Energy Shield next
I'm just
patch.
saying there's some meeting in the middle that we need to do for sure.
So to give you a feeling from, like, I played Warrior 90 first. That was the first thing I did, and I would enjoy Warrior as an archetype the most. Would you say it's a fair statement to say the Warrior and Mace skills and, sort of that side of the tree in particular is in a state where it has the worst of all of them? So it has the worst of the defenses and armor, it has the worst effective HP in terms of life, and it has basically the worst.
I feel like they've just said this. You're just making them say it again.
You can see why I'm feedbacking so hard in relation to this archetype.
Man, that's a brutal savaging, but I suppose I can't necessarily disagree with any of those with any of those assessments.
Fair enough. We can move on to the next topipic then, unless you have other statements on it.
Oh, what do they have?
I drop Ellie Storm for a double shock.
Yeah. You are.
You could just try it out.
Just effectively falls in
I would say
way,
just go into a boss and see if you're able to maintain double shocks.
So moving forward here, we have charms. So I saw that there were some notable changes in relation to charms. I thought it was a great change to be able to see when they're actually being activated, as well as the charms that are there as well. So some clarity things in relation to charm. I don't know if I saw whether or not charms in particular are actually getting tweaked in terms of number side of things, or if it was just some transparency related to charms. But how do you guys feel about?
We're not tweaking numbers in this patch. However, there's definitely something not right about charms as far as like the usefulness goes and all that sort of stuff. Like we need to do something. I don't think we've decided what it is yet, but it's clear to us at this point. Like, so charms came in like super late, and I just don't think they're quite like working out as well as I'd hoped. Like they just need something else, but we don't quite know what that will be yet. But we did want to at least make, like, one of the issues they did have is like you couldn't even tell when they helped you. So that certainly wasn't helping the case for them. So we can at least fix that. But yeah, there probably does need to be more stuff done with them, I think. I think it comes down a little bit to like how much the ailments matter against the player, and that's sort of something that
there's a few other ones. Like there's the one that's like unaffected. The next time you get slowed, protect you from slows, and honestly, a lot of the debuffs applied by monsters haven't been correctly classified as slows. And so it doesn't even work against them, and like there's a little bit of things like that where
I wasn't aware of that one.
Yeah, it's just kind of a bit bad. But yeah, there's a balance there of like, okay, most people have one slot, and then you got these mandatory mods to get more. But I don't
think you get enough charm slots. Just like I feel like you barely find belts with the extra slots, to be honest.
I agree.
I mean, we really just didn't finish. I mean, we increased the weightings. We've had patched that in since release. Yes.
Oh, okay.
Can't remember what patch it was in, but honestly, we're not all the way there yet, for sure. It's one of those things where it's not like
Maybe you should start off
experience
with
for
the
players,
default
at least.
charm
It's
slot,
like, just an underwhelming thing that needs some love, for sure.
Everybody
so it's
gets
not
one extra.
exactly number in the top 10 of the hit list, but like
I don't like charms
I
in
would
general.
expect to see improvements around there in the future.
Following up.
Yeah,
charms,
everyone has
any
ingenuity.
thoughts
Everyone only has
regarding
one.
adding more
Just give
charm
everyone
slots?
one free charm
It
slot.
feels really hindering to Crypto Unique when it comes to the topic of charms.
So this is the whole, like, if you have a unique belt, you only have one always.
Yeah, that's not a bad idea.
I also just want to add more slots outside of unique, so more in the tree and other ways to get them as well.
Sure.
So you don't necessarily have to.
They didn't mention it. I don't think they're going to mention that.
Like, there's nothing. I think at the time we had it that like you couldn't have more than 3.
It's
like
too
internally
specific
it was
to mention.
implemented that way, and now it's like you could have 50 slots +1 slots, but you'd only have 3, obviously. So we can give away a lot more +1 now and plus whatever we want all over the place. But yeah, I mean that is a way, yes, that some unique should have it, and probably more on the tree, more in other ways. I have to have a look at it, but yeah, there's no harm in it now, at least.
Yeah. All right, we're gonna move over to another topic, which is speaking of belts and trading the unique belts, for example. State of crafting and future plans is also involved. So I'm going to start with crafting and future plans you have there, and then we're going to talk about trade. So the current state of crafting is very different from PoE.
They have not.
The perception, again, to go
I
back
thought they would
on
ask the
PoE
question already.
is that
Maybe they
you're not
won't.
actually crafting unless it's rogue pog crafting. You're actually just pulling the arm on the vendor machine.
They did ask about the hacks, though.
So what's the state?
And the hacks were real. People did get their account hacked.
I don't know that there's a huge amount we can say about this right
It was
now.
a data breach.
Unless you've got any particular thoughts that you think you can go into. I mean, like one thing, of course, is that PoE 2 just has less crafting systems than PoE 1, just due to the fact that we add these typically with leagues and so on. So there's just less going on, which means that if you're like a PoE 1 player, then you're going to see less complexity there, for sure. But I don't think that's exactly what you're getting at, right? Like, I guess there's some theory. I mean, effectively what you're saying is people want more determinism, right? Which is like a continuous, endless thing that like people.
There's a fine line there,
Yeah.
and we're on the certainly more on the slot machine side of that line, like without a doubt, obviously, right? And there's more we need to do, I would say, to get towards that line. But that's our line that we determine. Not that I know how to describe that, because there's plenty of people who are just going to be like make everything fully deterministic all the way.
I mean, before we released, we had for a while a system that involved like deconstructing mods and then putting specific mods on items and so on. And like we just kind of like no one like with a system like that, we were never able to get it to the point where both people who played the game were happy and like we could be happy as far as like what it would let you do. And that like there's still something along those lines we might be able to do one day to kind of work that out, but we just kind of haven't really hit it yet. The socketables were kind of supposed to be the thing that was you had full control over, that's like determinism, and so that like
which has a lot of room to expand over time.
Sure.
Like,
So there's more stuff you can do there, but I guess because people see that as supplementary, they don't even necessarily see it as part of the crafting system, which is kind of interesting. Yeah, like it sort of replaced the crafting system in a way, but then as I said, people don't really see it as part of it. So yeah, I don't know. Like I mean. I guess the thing is we just have to find a way to do more things that make people feel like they have more control without actually sacrificing the like without making it too easy to just get the best shit, which is obviously always the concern, like making sure that there's still enough room for there to be items that are significant, like that are better than other items. So I mean, yeah, that's kind of where we're at, I suppose.
The other thing, of course, being it is important that to make sure as we add more of this determinism,
What are they even saying right now?
That we don't then just immediately devalue all item drops on the ground, right? Because that creates a different problem when now all of a sudden you don't really care about what you're finding, or you're only caring about normal items you're finding, or you create a different problem by doing that for sure.
And there is an argument certainly by people internally that PoE 1 got to the point of that being a problem, where you no longer cared so much about what was on the ground because you crafting would always get you something better. Yeah, like that is a concern for sure. But yeah, I guess that's kind of just our overall, just like nebulous cloud of thoughts on this matter, without really getting into too many specifics, I suppose. Yeah, I mean, I guess I don't know if you've got anything else to say about it.
Well, that being said, if we add more, we're adding something to Expedition, we don't know what it is necessarily, or what it will do to the thing, and then we're adding, what I would say, greater essences are too rare right now. And what else is there in there?
They're buffing greater
I guess,
essences?
there's certainly room to expand on the Omen system to do more there. Of course, people would argue then they don't want that to be the core crafting system to be gated behind Ritual, as opposed to Core Drop, which is then another consideration to make. And you get this cascading series of questions and stuff we need to answer, of which, need to think about it more and look more. But yeah, certainly there is the feedback of like, the crafting is too slot machiney, is something we're listening to and we have seen, and it is, I would say that is more towards our top 10 list of things to discuss and solve sooner than later.
Right.
I think that deterministic crafting is always something that's very sought after and popular, but I feel like I might be out of terms here, but my own personal perspective, I'll say that, is not the lack of deterministic crafting per se, it's lack of options to craft with. Because the slot machine crafting, we have that in PoE 1 as well. It's called Exalted, it's divining, and whatever we're doing with the items. It's not deterministic crafting. Yeah, exactly. Harvest. It's not deterministic crafting that's lacking. It is options to do something with the actual items. Because right now you drop an item, and what you can do is annul it or exalt it, or you can pop some chaos orbs. And the meta crafts, which are behind the omens, that's a different topic, which we're going to tackle in a bit here. We talk about trading. But the crafting has less to do with deterministic approaches, but rather giving us options to work with on an item to make us actually craft it, even if that means RNG and then X slam or something.
Right. And if that's the case, then more content will get you that, because
that will just be solve itself over time.
Right. Because as we just add more stuff during early access, there's just going to be more and more of those kinds of crazy systems.
But we'll make sure that, like I say, over time, it's not like there's something inevitable about it for sure. But because it is a bigger problem now, we would make sure that we try and ensure that as we're adding more content, it is leaning towards adding more options there and solving these problems that people have, as opposed to just like, I will do something cool and maybe it does and maybe it doesn't. So we'll have a lot more problem solving, designing, content created by more towards solving the problems, as opposed to, when you're at a point where you have so much content, a lot of the time you can be like, what are we going to do? Let's just make something cool and awesome. Whereas here it's going to be like, let's look at problems to solve and create content that comes from that. So there's like kind of two ways of coming up with the content. And certainly this is one that will be a problem that we're looking to try and solve by doing that, for sure.
That's fair. We're not going to go too deep into it, but following up to the state of trading, I mean, obviously we have trading being in its state that it is.
Temporalis question?
There's the volatility problem of the market's economy being player-based. For now, we have a golden standard of trading divine orbs, which quite literally holds close to zero value in terms of actual player usage outside of a handful of specific unique items, and is representative of trade power.
I use divines. I've divined a lot of jewels many times. I think divines are useful. What?
They just continue going up, and the inflation is just rampant at this point.
So I would have thought that if there was no divine orb sync, then the value of divines would go down rather than up. Like, presumably if the value of divines is going up,
yeah, Gazi doesn't know fucking clue what he's talking about
here.
Much
of, rather than the divines.
Yeah, so what I'm saying is, like, they become the golden standard, and since no one's using them, we get a higher quantity of them.
What are you talking about here?
Now, since that is the item people are using,
I've probably slammed like 100 divines.
They're now, one rare, one life pair of boots with 10% movement speed now cost 50 divines if I'm going to use some exaggerated examples.
Okay, so you're talking about the price in divines is going up as opposed to the price of
a divine is
the value of a divine is going
up.
The
item value,
Sure. Well, I mean, there's nothing I can kind of initially go into with this other than just that, like, we just have to look at this and work out what we're going to use to sync these things more. The intention with divines is that you'd sync them into making, like, if there's enough, like, things where you want to reroll mod values on, which, like, is uniques ideally. Like, the implication of that is that there aren't the uniques that people are wanting to roll to get good values on, right? I mean, I'm assuming that's the reason.
Some not enough. Yeah, well, I mean, we don't have enough unique.
As you go further in the list, they get more and more expensive. So start at the top, it's cheap, and it gets better and better as you scroll down.
There's another goal we have, of course, but I mean, so yes, there's not enough uniques, let alone enough uniques to be using divine orbs for
and of course the thing in PoE 1 where things were priced and that currency can help, but we don't have anything quite like that, I suppose. I mean, look, if that's a problem, we'll just like find a way to sync them, I suppose. But ideally, ideally, if everything's working correctly, they'd be syncing themselves due to the fact that there's enough things you want to reroll values on, and like uniques that you want to reroll values on. I'm actually curious to know whether people are even really bothering with that. Like, are people actually bothering to reroll unique values?
I guess some, but not many.
Right, not many.
Not many.
Astromentus.
Rolling on jewels is so OP. Like, just
I think no one's gonna pop
magic or
jewels.
jewels.
Gamble, so it's like that's literally gambling. But like in PoE 1, we have the option of meta crafting being a currency sink for divine orbs.
Yeah, yeah,
Former
yeah.
exalted. It creates this natural flow,
sure.
but also provides this crafting method for people to actually kind of help the state of crafting that people are looking for. Right now, they're omens. And
I don't
because
use
of this
Adorned.
type of inflation happening, they are so far away from most players that like even players that plays a lot. I haven't bothered myself. I played a lot.
If you have
Some of
perfectly
them
divine
very, like, I
jewels,
haven't touched an omen
70% is
because they're
probably
too
fine.
pricey to use. Like it's
The
very
hard part is
selective
making the
players that even engage
magic
with
jewels
because of how pricey
perfectly
they are.
divined and then
that just separates a lot of
evolving
crafting
it.
from even a larger player base.
One
Right,
other
right, right.
one other point of this is it might tie into a previous discussion we had about Magic Find influencing the economy in relation to currency drops being upgraded. So I know that's one portion we talked about. You're going to look at previously too. So I think these two probably tie in together here.
Yeah, what Dodd is saying.
I don't know that I've got anything particularly like smart to say about this right now, honestly. Though that would be the
Well, we
issue.
are at least making omens more common, so
Yes.
hopefully
Yes,
that
yes, that's but I
helps
mean
to
that
some degree. But
yeah.
I think we then also need more uniques and a lot more uniques, obviously, and a lot more uniques that would have divine sinks. And then I suspect the answer also is additional sinks of currency. Because I mean,
Fair
I
enough.
suspect it's a bit of everything here.
Okay.
Well, you don't have
so
to
we'll move
Adorned.
on
I'm
here.
not doing Adorned
We
myself.
have a significant amount of questions left. So I'm gonna try to speed up the cadence of these.
It
a
is
little bit
expensive.
here as we're about maybe halfway through, but well over halfway through the interview.
Halfway, dude. I'm not. Is
we're
this
gonna talk a
halfway
little
through?
bit about
We're
state
not
of
watching the whole
in-game and
thing.
state of league,
Like that.
league mechanics here. So I'm specifically going to go into league mechanics first here.
The questions
So
are getting worse.
Some league mechanics, essences, strongbox, to name a few, feel a little bit like noob traps. So I was kind of hoping to hear where your guys' thoughts are in relation to some of the underutilized ones. We talked about Expedition already, so you don't necessarily have to go into it, as well as the state of Breach. Breach feels notably like the one people are enjoying the most. Do you feel like that one's overtuned? And the other one, I mean, I don't know anyone who actually does strong boxes. So where do you want those and essences in particular, especially when it comes to the
I do
how
essences.
often essences are
You
not
literally
really
have
greater
to, 'cause
essences.
it has a
You don't
rare
really see
monster
greater
in it.
essences very often. Actually, saw more in the campaign than I have in any of my
You don't
in-game
carry
maps.
the
So
kill the
I'm
essence.
curious about kind of
You,
league mechanics as it
can't beat
ties
the
into
map.
in-game in particular.
Yeah, I mean, look, we just need to do a lot of balance here, and that's really all it is. And that once again just comes down to the relative lack of testing that in-game had before launch compared to other content. So yeah, there's just a lot of balance to do here.
It was meant to be more that essences, strong boxes, and like precursor artifacts are like the things you find that you can't anticipate coming. I understand you can.
I have no
speak
problem
into
with
them, that
essences.
sort
I
of
like
thing, but
them.
It's meant to be more like a thing you find that you don't know is coming. Whereas the I know we refer to them all as leagues, but like let's say the ritual expedition, etc., the ones you know are coming and that you're investing into. So you have these two categories where you have the ones you are adding and investing into, and then you have the other ones that are meant to be more exciting random finds. And it's safe to say, obviously, you know, there are so many essences that finding non-greater essences isn't giving you that dopamine, especially in in-game. And finding a strong box is like anti-dopamine right now, because it just makes you feel bad, because you're like, oh, this, and you just want to run away. So, look, it's safe to say that those failed at achieving that goal, hence why we have to make some improvements to them for sure. But I want to make sure that there's those two layers of things where one's the stuff you predict is coming, you can see the icons, you can apply them with the, you know, there's the base types of the precursor tablets to apply, and then you have the things where it's like, I hope I find an essence because it's like, I hope I get the good one that's worth, you know, way too many of those divine orbs. So yeah, having both layers is important. So yeah, and we'll continue to add ones at that upper level that get a tablet, and then we'll continue to add ones that are more at that random find excitement in the map that you don't know is coming. Because you don't want to put it all on one layer where you know everything that's coming necessarily, because then nothing is exciting. And you can do exciting within that to some degree, but not always.
I mean, really, it all is to say that like there are some of these that just aren't as good as the others, and we just have to improve them. But
Yeah.
what I will say is that the breach monster density is probably a little on the high side. Like it's actually to the point, by the way, where like we get a bunch of error messages in the logs for failing to spawn monsters in breach because they're packed so tightly together that they don't even spawn anymore. So there's actually like there's an issue there that we have to do something
Like
about.
hundreds.
Yeah.
Like
So
actual hundreds of error logs of just like cannot fail to place monster due to lack of space.
yeah. So yeah, like that There was a joke if we could release reduce breach monster density by 20% and the players wouldn't even see it because it would just result in less error messages for us. So, you know, like there are actually some stuff that needs to be sorted out there. But we don't want what I don't want is people to feel like, oh, we're just like nerfing that into the ground or something like that. We definitely don't want to do that. But some of the other league mechanics just need some addressing to make them as better. And yeah, they just need to be better. And yeah, it'll all just come down to us like experiencing them and seeing if they suck, we'll improve them. And like right now, I know that Strongbox has got the most improvement in this patch, and I know Essence has got like at least some adjustment to make them a little bit less crap. And there's probably a few more adjustments.
It's more about the combat than the itemization. That's something we still need to look into.
Right. So there's just stuff like we just need to improve all that stuff until it's good, right? Simple as that, really.
Fair enough. How do you guys feel about the progression of players entering into mapping, going from map tier 1 to you're doing tier 16s, and then into pinnacle bossing? How do you feel like the pacing in there? They give you one.
Dude, what are these questions? Can these guys get better questions?
Boss fights that will happen at different iterations, so you probably know where I'm going.
Yeah. So we're
do
not
not care
really
what they
happy
think
with
about
how
this.
that is right now.
Like
we're not happy with how the quest. The quests that effectively we give you are just like do X many of tier Y maps. And honestly, like we can do a lot better. That's kind of a larger. It's something that I would have loved to be able to just solve instantly, but like it does need some more work. And I think there's a few different areas of this. So one of them is that like just the way the progression feels just isn't as good as PoE 1 in some way. That's kind of slightly hard to define. Like in terms of just like the feeling of like the progress you're making just isn't quite right. So I think we need to do more. Like there might be some changes we have to make to how the Atlas works to make that better.
Certainly want some bosses between those points.
Yeah. Like it just needs more of a feeling
I don't mean
of
random ones. I mean like actual ones. Still along a series of objective-driven kind of narrative-involved things where you're getting your. It's still an end game, not pinnacle. Boss at tier 6 and maybe at tier 11, and they're the quest versions, and you're doing those, and then maybe there's Uber versions, and I'm just rambling.
There just needs to be more going on with regard to how that progression feels. So that's one element. So the next one is that the tutorialization of the end game is not really there. Like we need to do more around this so that like it actually sort of eases you into end game a little bit better. As far as like if you're a new player, like we kind of just throw you in the deep like. We fixed a lot of things about the introduction to the game through the campaign, but then you get to endgame and it's kind of like we don't really do enough to kind of really ease you in there, I would say. And then I did have a third point, but I can't remember what it was now. There was something about that. Oh yeah, that's right. And it sort of ties in a little bit to what I was. This kind of was covered a little bit with what Mark was saying just a second ago. But like the way that you progress through the tiers, like you can go through the tiers too quickly and then you kind of get left behind with like what rewards you should be getting, and like in order for us to fix that we kind of need to make each tier more meaningful with regard to what you have to do there and what's going on. So there'll probably just be more there at endgame just to kind of make it feel like more of a progression and more of a and that can include more storyline elements and more things like that. There just needs to be more basically just there to make that progression feel better. The game does take a bit of a turn suddenly when you get to endgame of like it doesn't really feel like it really does feel very different from campaign to end game. And as I said, it's just a matter of sort of easing that transition, making that a little bit better and smoothing out that more for sure.
I want to hone into 2 points here, because you talk about it feels like a different game, sort of a different sense of progression at least. We have to go from campaign into action. This is a question we're going to ask later, but it seems a good time to ask it now. Is that intended, and do you like that as a design principle? Because I've seen people say that they really like the campaign, and me myself, I like the difference, but I've seen people state that they really enjoy the campaign pacing, then they get to maps and they feel like it starts blasting, it's almost a different game at that point. So I think the audience would love to know how you feel about that difference.
You do actually, you do need to get to the point at some point where you feel incredibly powerful. However, I would say that there is like a bit of a switch flip right now that's kind of not quite right. Like there's definitely something that ain't right going on there.
Well, there's two. There is the character power side. I mean, a lot of people are getting to endgame. Excuse me. A lot of people are getting to endgame and they aren't just becoming gods all of a sudden, right? A lot of people are struggling and falling off and can't sustain maps and are dying and it's not like you get to endgame and all of a sudden you're ultra powerful. But certainly a lot of people are getting to endgame and then are just lost as to what to do.
Is this still that same question?
Like a lot of players really like to be told exactly here's what you do, here's what you do, here's what you do, here's your next objective, here's the thing to look forward to. And something just like complete 10 tier 1 maps is not a fun objective, right? That's just like, okay, sure, I'll do that. Where we could do that a lot better, right? Go to this place, travel here, do this exact thing, discover this, do a tower, run this breach, you know, all these things. We can have obviously way better objectives and ones that we could still design. And you're getting your passive points for each, and you're like, okay, the next thing it wants me to do is this exact thing, not just, I've completed my 10, now it just wants me to complete tier 2 maps. I see. I'll just keep going, sure. So there's no, like, whereas the campaign's very story, it's like, go kill this boss, get here, and you got NPCs talking to you and everything, and then all of a sudden it's just, now I'm killing stuff, ticking up this ticker, and, you know, a lot of people probably aren't really getting into, based on the tutorialization, they're not really getting into the towers, the tablets, all of that stuff, and then they're just also possibly finding it a bit too hard, and they're dying, and so, yeah, it's not as friendly to the people who, especially non-PoE 1 players, it's not as friendly to them as we would want it to be at all. That being said, like, obviously, there is also the capacity at that point to just be like, all right, I'm going to change my build to do this or go do this, and now I'm just, like, obliterating everything everywhere. And you don't have all those, like, story events breaking up your flow of gameplay. It's just, like, map, kill everything, map, kill everything, map, kill everything, which people love. But, yes, for those who know how to do that, that happens too soon. And for those who don't know how to do it, they're, like, getting stuck in a hole and finding themselves very lost. So, yeah, 2 sets of improvements. The people that are going to obliterate everything, they're going to have their fun no matter what. They'll get there a bit later, sure, if that's how you want to think about it. But it's way more important to not just have that, like, very much narrative-driven change in pace where all of a sudden it's just like, and it's gone.
Pick
and
up
now
every
you're just
unique,
doing, you know, kind of
break
random
them
stuff.
down
You know, what am I supposed to do
shards.
next kind of thing, and yeah. So yeah,
because
there's
the
a lot
amulet and the
going
glove
wrong
are
there.
very
More content
common,
would do it, more
so you can chance them
time
very
on it,
easily.
more quests, more, you know.
And that's all you
again,
need,
PoE
really.
1 had a lot of this stuff, and it had so many different
Definitely
axes.
doable
If you
in
didn't like
SSF.
one thing, you could do another. If you didn't like that, you could do another, and you could do certain things earlier or later. And we just need to get to that
Uniques
point
are
where there's
very,
just more,
very nice
more
to,
better, without
just get
overcomplicating
those
everything.
shards.
So my last follow-up to this in-game topic, and I'll send over the guys to continue the conversation elsewhere. So you mentioned that there's a little bit of a separation from what I'm hearing about people that, like, know how to blast, like, they're going to go anyway, right? They're going to crush through and destroy it. Then you have the people that are, like, kind of learning the game, getting into the in-game, that might, like, get stuck and lost. How do you feel about the, you know, one pour, though?
So Spark
then
is
now
fine.
that the
It's
game has
good.
been out of the wild, does the one pour, though, feel like it's widening that gap and punishing players who maybe are learning the game?
Oh, please don't nerf one
too
portal.
much?
We
But
can't
it's
have
the
this be
people
too
who
easy.
are going to blast regardless. It doesn't matter because they're not going to be dying consistently in maps. So how do you feel about one Porto state of mapping currently, as well as XP
good.
loss
It's
still being
good.
fairly significant?
I like one
even
portal.
though in the previous
Don't nerf
interview
that
you
shit.
stated that you don't feel like you need to have the XP loss as much, considering you do have that one Porto defense. We're in a state where we
don't
currently have
need
both.
the game to be so friggin' handholdy. Come on.
So first of all, we did discuss quite
The
a lot about
friggin'
whether or not we
D4
want to go back
gamers
on one
obviously
portal or
wants
not,
more
and I think
portals.
that it comes down to the fact that I think that it just would really not feel the same if like the whole death actually mattering thing. I
See,
think does,
Mark-
is actually
Mark
important.
understands.
I think we sort of decided, like, because we discussed because we were talking about the pinnacle boss thing. Obviously, the discussion came up of like, okay,
It's
should we just be
okay
allowing 6
to
portals everywhere? Should we
break
allow
your map
checkpoints
and be
everywhere? And I
upset.
think we ultimately decided, like, we really don't want to go that way if possible. So we're going to try, like, and that's kind of where we came to, like, well, first we'll try with this pinnacle stuff. We'll, like, make sure that that's, like, something, because, you know, that's actually
I
something we've
bricked
got, like,
so many
true economic
citadels
value
doing
that
like
you need
a
to actually
600%
preserve,
citadel.
and so it matters a lot more, and, like, the amount of time it takes you to get there and everything.
I
that
definitely am ripping my
But
maps.
I think if, like, then, to me, I feel like to be a game, you have to have some level of failure being
There you go.
possible. And the 6 portal thing, like, it really just does. To me, it just never really led to a situation where you felt like you really could fail in the same way. So yeah, I'm not really a fan. I much prefer the whole, like, one death thing. As for XP penalty,
Base take.
part of the thinking around that is that, like, it's kind of keeping you in the place where you're supposed to be, as far as,
Yeah,
like,
that's
you know,
what
if you're
he's saying.
dying all the time, then you're probably not ready to keep going up the power curve. But I mean, maybe that's, like, the wrong way to look at it. I'm not sure. I don't know if you've got any different thoughts about this.
If you're dying, right now there's too many penalty axes. So if you are dying all the time, you're not going to get maps, and thus you're not going to
You
go
got
anywhere.
4 fragments.
And
what the
you
fuck?
also it's kind of like an add insult to injury. You're also now just not leveling. So
But
yeah,
you do have to have it. So that
I agree. I think there's a few axes, and I think they're just a bit too severe when all combined together. Combined with, I also think that the very start of maps is just too difficult. Like, I think we should ease into that a little bit. So bring that down a bit and then ramp the difficulty up. Well, I mean, we could hit the same spot, but I think it's just a little bit, and I think that's mostly due to the
Oh,
number of rare
progress.
monsters and
the
the
animation.
obviously monster combinations, because you can kind of avoid bosses, and like I don't mind. I think that's a little bit of a different situation, but you get all these monsters you haven't seen in ages, and they all combine together, and so you have to kind of like generally when you go into those areas, you learn what the monsters are doing and how they're combining, and then you maybe die once or twice.
I feel like
if
there's
you're
only
not,
one
you know,
monster that matters, and it's the one
ultra
that shoots those
powerful.
skulls at you
And
when
then
they
you get
hit
into
them.
maps and you're immediately
Eternal
sprung on
Knights.
like heaps of different
Any other
monster
monster, I don't care what it
permutations, and
is.
they're doing things,
I
and
don't
you're getting
even
killed all
notice the
time, and there's
difference.
a lot to learn. You do the next map and you're like, well, I can't take the learnings of that previous map and apply it to this next map because it's a whole different set of monsters. So there's nothing to really take from one map to another aside from just like maybe playing a bit more carefully, or like, you know, not being so overzealous and whatnot. So it's just a little bit difficult there, and I suspect
this better?
We need to bring down the difficulty a little bit and ease people into it a bit more.
I adjusted the volume.
But I need to think about it certainly a lot more and actually get a little bit more analytics on it as well, and actually see what the actual problems are. And again,
You guys need to boost up your
read
total
a lot
volume
more
now.
feedback,
I lowered it.
honestly.
Sure.
It would be nice if there was a way to deal with the fact that, so I mean, like, okay, the penalty for not clearing a map, we remove the extra content from the map, and it would be nice if you could just spend another map and still be able to do that content. But unfortunately, that isn't possible. So for example, if you failed on the boss, then you just spend another map and then you can fight the boss again and do that whole thing, right? Like that would be nice if that was the case. But unfortunately, we can't do that because it would open up too many economic abuse things where like you fail the map intentionally because you want to farm the items to the rest of the area. So it's very difficult for us to come up with a solution. Like, 'cause
It's
I really
fine. There's no
prefer that,
problem.
honestly.
Doesn't need a
So it'd
solution.
be nice if we were able to come up with a solution that would allow you to redo content by spending an extra map without having to like have all the problems that being able to rerun a single map would actually cause. So yeah, like I sort of wish I could come up with a thing for
I personally
that.
want to keep the one portal and
Yeah.
and adjust the other axes and see how that plays out before compromising on the one portal. But yeah, it's a bit tricky. It certainly is the case. We have discussed this so many times. Like it's come up, and before we released it, it's like people are going to definitely complain about this, and we're like, we know, and we haven't found the solution.
It's a common question. Had to ask.
Yeah.
Yeah. I understand.
Fair enough. Yeah.
So now there's a lot more people. Well, now there's a lot more feedback and a lot more people. It's much easier for us to get the specifics on how we could get it right, like for sure. Not to say it's now trivial to do. It's still hard.
I actually don't even think Darth Microtransaction wants one portal. He just had to ask it.
Take less of a shot
It's
in
a
the dark,
Reddit
so to
question.
speak. So I would expect some changes.
We'll have to wait and see. So we're cutting it a little bit tighter because we have a lot of questions. So I'm going to try to speed run as much as we can. Because
Has he even
there is
asked a
section
minion
that
question
care
yet?
very
I don't
much
know if he
about
has.
Minions. So let's get there, okay? Let's just dive into it. We're going to talk about ailments, damage with time effects. We're talking about ignite. We're talking about dots like poison, for example. So the question is, what's your feelings around it on a hit, as it scales on hit, opposed to its dot scaling, which we have a bit different scaling in PoE 1, because now it's based off the actual hit you're doing, which was taken away from PoE 1. So what's the reasoning behind this, and what's your thoughts on it?
Know that one.
Well, I can't remember the history of PoE 1 too much, but I understand the difference. I mean, I personally prefer that the heavier the hit, the more the dot. The issue we run into is, of course, then you just get... It's either balanced around the extremely hard heavy hitters, and everything else can't really scale them currently. And then you get into the thing, or you go down the PoE 1 route where it's a bunch of skills have ailment penalties and a bunch of them don't, and that more normalizes it so you can play any skill to do the dots. I would say I prefer the asymmetry where it's like, here are the skills that are generally better. The problem is, I'd say that's, you know, again, I mentioned the bleed Hammer of the Gods thing earlier, where it's just now the bleed one-shots the monster, and, you know, you get into that kind of situation. So there's a whole bunch of balance here to get right, but I don't want it to just be like, well, implicitly, I don't want it to be like you can play any build and bleed. You should have to have some combinations, and there's more mechanics and more things we need to add, or more unique items and all of that stuff.
Specifically,
It's tricky because generally speaking, when we're doing first pass balance things, I really like to avoid... I like the bumpiness where we've got like different skills being better at different things. And I really don't like it when we end up in a situation like, for example, in you know, you've got the whole like damage effectiveness on spells in PoE 1, and it's like this is a thing you do to solve a balance problem. Like this is unrelated to ailments, but like I'm saying, it's just another example of one of those things where you like, oh, I've got this problem where these skills are sort of all out of line with each other, and so we have to do this like sledgehammer to it. We're like, okay, we're gonna go and we're gonna normalize everything, and I kind of hate that type of thing, and I really try to avoid it wherever we can. And it's kind of one of those annoying things where as games
like,
get
that's
like
not in
as you
PoE
do
2
more and more of this
as well.
balance stuff, you kind of end up with more of these kind of normalization procedures that go on. And so it's nice if we can find ways to avoid it if we can. And that's kind of why I like to try and pitch everything. Like we started with in PoE 2 with a lot of things having like going back on a lot of those sort of normalization procedures we did from PoE 1, and ideally we would be able to find different solutions that don't involve having to do that. You know, yeah, it's one of those things that I worry we might still having to do some of that stuff in order to fix problems. But ideally we can avoid it, and that's kind of why we went back on some of those normalization procedures for PoE 2.
So one point, just real quick here about bleeding in particular, because you're talking about bleeding.
Mhm.
Since you can't bleed on energy shield, bleeding style element builds are basically disabled against energy shield types of mobs. So feelings on that? Is that something that's just like, well, that's as intended?
Can't bleed on energy shield.
If you're running like a,
You can-
unless you're breaking the energy
can-
shield, your hit's not going to apply bleed on energy shield, for instance.
I thought that the
even true.
thing with bleed was it's supposed to bypass energy shield.
It does,
Yeah,
but you can only apply a bleed if the hit deals damage to the life pool. So if you're playing CI, you're essentially immune to poison, and bleed.
I will take your word for that, but if that is how that works,
It
that
wasn't
is
how it was
not
intended to
how
be
that
how
is
it was.
meant to work.
Yeah, it's supposed to be the.
I only
Wait,
saw
are we
this
getting
because
nerfed?
yesterday I heard someone upstairs talking about this and going like, people are just wrong. You can apply bleed to energy of it. Look, and then I was like, okay, but I'll confirm that after this. And look, if that is how that works, that is like
Bleed was actually supposed to be like an
Not supposed- yeah.
anti-mage mechanic, not a like, you know, like as in like you.
Oh,
you
no.
need someone
Not
with
like
energy
this.
Shield, so
Well, if,
like that
if
was kind
you
of the
are
idea
right,
there. So
and I'm wrong,
Yeah.
then Quinn has thrown me under the bus because I asked that question from him. So
well, again, we'll take.
we could easily be wrong. Like it's amazing
It
how.
also could
yeah.
be that it has been changed internally and not yet externally. That is
Right.
another thing also. And like someone may have fixed this some 2 weeks ago and we never
Yeah.
got it live or something. Who knows? Like,
Yeah.
I'll look into it. It's not meant to
Yeah.
work that way.
Mm-hmm.
all right, moving forward here, we are on elements, and now we are into ascendancy swapping. Is the next topic here. So these are kind of going back to conversations we've had previously in interviews where you guys were debating it and you wanted to see after the launch of the game, where do we stand?
We're immune to
Personally,
bleed
I
as
still
CI.
like not being able to swap. I know. No one will like that hot take. And there are plenty of other developers here. And
I love
remember even
Jonathan.
pitching it, and I was like, "Is this your hill to die on? Is this what you believe?" But that being said, I still prefer that decision being ultra important, and I prefer that decision being locked in. But it's one of those ones that's really hard to rationalize why it's better one way or the other. To be honest. Like, it wouldn't be the end like that hard to actually convince me the otherwise, because it is not the hill I would.
I think
die
the
on,
thing
that's
that
for
should
damn
be able
sure.
to be changed is the little potion you drink that gives you
I
like
don't know, it's
mana
like,
regen or like chaos
have
res,
my
whatever that thing
preference.
is.
I don't know why I have my preference that way. I guess I just like more decisions, especially about characters, to be a bit more
I
final.
think ascendancy can be locked in.
That being
That's
said, we
fine.
have respeaking of everything else. I don't know. I don't really know where we're going to go with this one, aside from like, sure, we'll reevaluate it and we'll see. But at the end of the day, we have a lot of developers that feel very
It
strongly.
just punishes new players if you can't
And
drink.
then we
If
feel one
they
way
drink
and
the
we
wrong
discuss it with those
class.
people, and we
It's
kind of see
unnecessary.
where we land. But like,
Ascendancy
we're not
makes
gonna
sense because you
ignore,
can just make a
you know,
new
the
character and
opinions
like do the other one.
preferences of our
It'll be a
team
new
or our
build
design
if you
team and
change it.
whatnot. You know, just to overrule it, just because. That being said, I sit on one side of that fence for sure. That probably the majority of players do not sit on.
I'm not against
I mean, I'm
rerolling
55%
ascendancy, but
in
I mean,
favor of, rerolling ascendancy
whatever.
personally. So it's very hard for me to argue against it when I would say that I would allow it. But I'm also once again.
no, I
like,
think the
other
second
people
one
seem
was
to
like
feel more
chaos
strongly.
res.
Um,
Chaos
I mean,
res or
what I would
stats.
be open to is like, I understand you have to go online to have.
The other one was
look at
+5
what
all
those
stats.
ascendancy classes are, but I would be more open to having in-game things where when you're creating your character, I don't want to not in a way that wouldn't overcomplicate it for new players where they're like, oh, what are all these, what are ascendancy classes? What's going on here?
I'm not really in favor of that argument personally, because I don't think that you are equipped at the point of the start of the game to be able to assess what the ascendancy classes are. So kind of I don't really think that really holds much water.
It's less for new players, I guess.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
then again, experienced players already know how to get that information. So I don't know the right solution there, honestly, but you can bet it's going to come up in discussions another 55 times this year. So
Surely. We're just at the start of it. Again, we don't want to take too much of your time, so we just keep up with speed running some questions. And the first one here is, given the current TTK, so time to kill, of pinnacle bosses by many of the stronger builds in the game, I guess the question is, what is the goal for build power? Is one-shotting pinnacle bosses an intended power level for builds, or is it the intended design something else?
It should definitely not be the case that the first time you fight a pinnacle boss that you one-shot it. Like, that's the kind of thing that maybe you can get to after crazy amounts of, like, extra items being found, but you shouldn't be doing that the first time you play it. So, yeah, it's not right. And that's just, there's some builds that are outrageous. And, we want to actually make it so the boss can use their abilities. That's why we spend a bunch of time making them, after all.
Exactly.
So, yeah.
When you first get there and you're kind of relatively equipped for it, it shouldn't, like, it should still be a 1 to 3 minute fight kind of thing.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I'm not talking about
reference.
1 minute of emerging. I'm talking 1 to 3 minutes of actual skill combat. Not like...
Okay. Oh, that's a good time of reference we can use moving forward, knowing that's the kind of the goal going for the vision. Next question is, given the difficulty of requirements to get the 7th and 8th ascendancy points, is this intended to be something that not all average players can acquire?
We definitely wanted the final ascendancy points to be something that was like a significant goal. Like, this is an awesome.
They did feel harder.
Like, it's supposed to be
I wasn't expecting it
get the last 2 points.
to be that hard.
I mean, as for an average player versus not, that's kind of hard to answer. I mean, I don't know if the average player gets halfway through maps really. So it sort of depends on the definition. But we wanted it to be a big thing that you get.
So, map clear conditions, talking about that for a moment. Clearing rare mobs are effectively like the only real map clear condition at the moment. Is that the plans to continue that going forward, or is this sort of one of many conditions and is a placeholder, or how do you guys feel about the map clear condition being strictly rare mob clearance?
I suspect as we get to answering the exact same thing we talked about before with the more objective-driven and learning.
I wish they would ask,
we'll probably expand
when all the rare monster icons start showing, can you please also show all the league mechanics?
Things you're doing in each map that isn't just killing all the rares, but
that would be a really
large
nice
amount
question.
of work to do those and to do them well. Otherwise, you just end up with this thing where it's like, oh, I like this one, but these other 4 are
That's not really a
terrible.
question though. That's sort of like asking them to do something.
Bad ones of these, and killing the monsters is at least something that you already want to do. So that's kind of part of the reason why we sort of went with that in the end.
So
there's certainly more work. Sorry, go.
No, okay. So the Atlas tree currently is gated basically behind pinnacle boss progression. Kind of the same type of question as in clear conditions. Is this going to be mandated in the same moving forward, or are you guys looking to add in more iterations of progression on the Atlas tree outside the pinnacle boss clear?
We did discuss changing how the core of the Atlas progression is, but as for the actual pinnacle, as for the individual league trees, I think we were still keen to sort of have that be the kind of extra stuff that you really get at the end of that
to get
thing.
the pinnacle boss's tree, it should be.
Shock Siphon is OP.
We want to keep that for sure.
Sure.
And for each of the contents, but I want to upgrade the core Atlas tree for sure. I think it's quite boring and flat right now. There's not a lot going on there, and part of that is to do with as we add more content, it will make it more interesting. But there's certainly a better job we can do of that, and how you acquire the points. Again, getting away from that grind and getting into more like, all right, like do this 2 points, do this 2 points, do this 2 points, not grind this 2 points, grind this 2 points for the actual core tree. For the sub trees for the leagues, I actually do like them being behind that, but ideally each league would then have its own meta system within it to amplify itself in some way, which
I've listed them on the screen. Can you read that?
So it's something we'd be looking into in the future when we're upgrading the existing content as opposed to adding new content.
All right. I bet all of our chats have been spamming this, so I'm just gonna throw it out right away. Map tab when?
That should be reasonably soon, shouldn't it?
Yeah, it's an as soon as possible thing. We've got people working on it right now.
Nice.
As soon as it's done, you'll have it. Like, it was not a Yeah.
Yeah, it'll be done soon.
We wanted it there
Done
for
soon.
release.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Be done soon.
Let's go to tech questions, optimizations, and bugs, kind of a little category we have, and then I'm going to do some minion questions for you guys as well. Appreciate you guys taking the time. And
I hope his last questions are the minions, so we can
first
just
question we
turn
have
this
is
off.
something you talked about in a previous interview, I believe, with the Ciceron. It was predictive network mode and lockstep. What is the reasoning behind this specific topic, or what's your take on it, seeing how people are performing right now with this?
I actually haven't hugely investigated this, to be honest. I don't know if you've got any more information about that.
I do not.
Yeah.
I mean, we just have lockstep right now.
Oh, the predictor's just not. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's not
we
that.
only
Yeah,
have
yeah, yeah,
lockstep
yeah. Okay,
currently,
right.
yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Well, yeah, we just need to fix that, right? Yeah, like honestly, the people who would be working on that have not even come back from break yet, so it's just not something that that we've got. But yeah, we do need to get that working. I think it was just disabled mostly out of caution, right? Because we just expected lots of shit would be broken.
There was a few things. I can't remember
Right.
exactly what they were.
But yeah, we need to get it
there were some
sorted.
things that didn't work
Yep.
in that mode, and we had to re-engineer them.
Yeah.
And yeah, no time.
Yeah, we'll get to it though.
Okay, couple just real quick optimization type of questions here. Terrain obstruction is something that has been helped a little bit in this recent, we saw in the video there, you guys were talking about making it a little bit more clear and transparent. But some things like trees, for instance, covering your screen from the overhead, etc. Do you have any feelings on how terrain obstruction is currently in the game, and is there any plans around making this a little bit?
It's just a matter of individual work on each individual thing, just like looking at each.
I don't
thing
like
and being
dropping
like,
the
yeah, what
tacos.
the
I'm
bounds
probably
need
going to
be,
put it
that
back
kind of
on.
That some trees don't fade out.
Yeah,
Until
Probably
you're,
tomorrow I'll
like,
have it back on.
intersecting with
I was just
them,
trying
or
without
it's
it, see how it
annoying
felt.
'cause you get and the faster you move, the more you.
It's definitely more
be
dangerous
obscured,
without
So
it.
there's some timing changes. There's some proximity changes. There's
It's just a matter of individual
bunch
balance
of
things.
To be addressed.
There's still some areas.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
And then as far as optimization is concerned, I mean, we'll just keep working on it, right? I mean, in the background, you've got the engine guys working on things. There is one very annoying crash that is very, very hard to debug that happens on, I believe it only happens on NVIDIA cards. Where like after sort of an hour or an hour
97.
and a half kind of thing, you'll get a crash to desktop, and it's been very, very difficult to track down, and we're adding more debug stuff. In fact,
This is what I want to hear. Are they going to fix these
if
crashes?
we can't work it out internally, we'll actually probably eventually make a patch where we tell people to like turn on a command line flag that will enable extra debug information, because the thing that will allow us to debug this does reduce frame rates by like 5%. So we might actually ask people to like, hey, turn this on until we find the problem, and then it'll reduce your frame rates a little bit, but it'll help us track it down. And then once we've got that, then we should be able to work it out. Effectively, they're like concurrency bugs within the GPU. But annoyingly, we were also told that the next version, like NVIDIA told us that the next version of the NVIDIA driver does make the crash go away. But then they also said that they didn't know why that was the case. So I don't know if we can 100% rely on that either. So yeah, there's something weird going on that's like quite hard to track down going on here. And hopefully we can work it out soon. But yeah, we just need we need more debug information. It's very hard to track
My
down,
Windows is
unfortunately.
forced updating to the
And
bad
it's kind of annoying how
update.
it takes so long to reproduce.
6
like there's even a
days.
thing where
I
like
can't stop
the first
it.
hour after we do a restart patch, we don't get any of those crashes because it literally takes more than an hour to reproduce. And then after that, they start coming in. So there's like something weird going on there. But it's the most common crash, and like we're just like really annoyed. It's just very annoying to deal with.
Thanks for the answer, because that was a very common question. People were talking about crashes and wanted to ask you about it. So good answer there. At this portion, all we have left is some minion questions from Ghazi, just a couple of them, and then we're into the rapid fire portion, and then we're pretty much done. So try to get you out of here in 10, 15 minutes. Go on, Ghazi.
Sure.
Let's just dive into the nitty gritty. Let's talk about Hodor, minion body blocking in doorways. Let me just add the word "come on."
So,
Solutions,
I
please.
mean, yeah, like this is something that we need to work out a better solution for. Like what I can say is that, okay, so people will immediately say, oh, just make it so that minions can just walk through each other. And it's like, we've done that and it sucked. And it doesn't just suck because of that it looks bad or something. Like it sucks to actually, like, it actually just makes the minions play worse. So we need to find another solution that's like smarter somehow that like fixes that issue. One thing we are planning on doing, just as an initial test that we've got, I believe someone's doing at the moment, is at least making it so that when minions die due to distance, that they respawn immediately near your character rather than it waiting until the next refresh. So like that'll at least maybe help a bit, but I don't know if it's like the full solution by any means. But there's something we have to do around this, but I honestly don't know quite what it is yet. And as I said, like all of the obvious solutions, as you might say, we have tried and they weren't great. So it really is going to take something a little bit more complicated to do to like work out what we're doing here. But yes, I appreciate the issue for sure. Like I'm not saying that we're not going to do something about it because we have to. I'm just saying that like it's not clear yet what that is, and at the very least, in the meantime, we can do the respawn instantly upon timing on the distancing out, which will help a little bit maybe. But yeah, more needs to be done.
It's one of the big problems people complain about with
for
the build.
sure.
For them rubber banding to you resurrecting is much better than them dying, because that is part of my other question I had here. However, in PoE 1, there is a feature added as a modifier on well-telegraphed boss abilities that you're supposed to, as a player, dodge where your minions can't because you can't control them, so they do less damage to them. PoE 2 doesn't seem to have this based on the data mine I've been checking, which seems to be that they're just expected to literally just die, and then you have to sit there and wait for them to resurrect. What's the reasoning for not giving us convocation, which would also assist in the whole minion doorways and tight corridors?
Are there not minion things in the AI? We did do some of that.
Not that I've seen.
That's a good question.
This I can't remember exactly an AI.
So no, I mean the damage.
From a damage perspective, not hugely, no. We were tinkering around with this whole expectation of like how often, if you have like no investment and all this, how often are your minions supposed to be permanent minions, supposed to be dead versus alive, and then what are the things you can do to keep them alive? Because it was meant to be more in order to have your minions, otherwise they're never dead, right? They're permanently alive, and then the DPS is you just running around doing whatever you're doing. And
so that is really the issue, just to be clear, is that if we make it so that boss abilities aren't killing your minions, then that means that that would effectively mean your minions would just never die. And so then what's the...
It was meant to be more of active, what are you doing to keep them alive actively? And we haven't got that right. Like, for sure, we haven't got that right. So like, I guess Bone Offering was meant to be one of those examples of like boss slams coming, and then, but also then you got a multi-thread, you got about how do I survive and how do I do this at the same time? So there's certainly something going wrong there where we haven't, and I believe there's probably still a lot of boss abilities that just haven't been tuned correctly with respect to, you know, again, how often they're killing certain minions versus not. Because there will be things, I'm assuming, that are just completely unavoidable and they just wipe out your entire minion thing, and then it's like, well, what was I even supposed to do? So. The problem is, as soon as you get into this build, the level of like detail that you have to do, where you not only have to, sure, there might be some system change, and it's easy to probably do a cop out that's just like, whatever. You know, it's actually the right answer is to go through every single boss and test them and go through monsters and go through mods, and like it's a huge amount of detail and takes quite a long time. We have people like kind of actively providing that more specific feedback, and we are iterating on it. But there's still certainly a handful of things we need to do. Otherwise, I'd say the blocking the doorways is a more catastrophic problem for sure. Like where they just like can't get through, and they're like running off screen and them dying. So like we're focusing more on that stuff first, and then we'll probably get back to the boss specific balance with respect to how often certain skills are just wiping out all your minions and you know all of that.
Yeah, I mean I understand the idea that the bosses are supposed to kill them. The problem is when a boss leaves a damage over time effect on them, they kill a bunch of them, your timer starts ticking, and then the dot kills the next one, it resets, and then it kills the next one, it resets. You just have to wait for all of them to die, and now you're sitting there doing nothing. You feel like you're in a wheelchair, not able to run around. But an instant use convocation could be a solution to that, which would help with the whole body blocking. A lot of people have been spamming me about make them give us convocation, and I'm in that category as well. But moving on to the other question, not wasting much time, and that is a very interesting question. What is the reasoning behind making the minion's movement speed a direct replicator copy of what you have as a player, including when you get a minion movement speed debuff reduction on yourself?
So me and Mark were actually quite surprised to learn
I wear glasses.
when you get a debuff on your character that it causes your minions to slow down.
Yeah, it's not intended.
That was not intentional, and so we'll just fix it.
We'll just change that.
Yeah, we'll just fix it. That was not a thing we even realized was the case.
Okay.
Yeah.
Next one is tooltip is a bit wonky with the minions, with it being incorrect in cases, especially accuracy actually being very wildly off, where it says you have a 100% chance to hit and it's not hitting, and then the tooltip is missing altogether on things like rating spirits. And sometimes when you change a gem on an unrelated ability, suddenly your tooltip on your damage minions is also changing randomly. Is this something
That
you've
sounds
tracked,
like
or-
a bug to me.
Yeah,
Um,
we'll
Yeah.
fix that as soon
Yeah, yeah.
as.
I just need to look into what's
Our
going on. With it.
developer responsible, well, they might be back today, but our developer responsible for that has still been on holiday. So as soon as they're back, they'll get onto fixing them.
Yeah, yeah.
A
There was
handful of
quite a
tooltip
lot of
related
rushed
issues.
like description stuff happening right at the end of development there. So I'm sure there's stuff, even more stuff that's wrong than that. Just like with that stuff.
I'm
we need to-
surprised that tooltip stuff is as good as it is. Given, like, I remember 2 weeks before release, I was like, "This is a dead feature. Like, it may as well not exist." And then all of a sudden, it was at least something that I was like, "Okay, that's a pretty good effort on what they did." So,
Yeah,
there's
it
just
was.
more to do, though, of course.
I got plenty more other minion questions, but I'm just gonna go with the one that's been spammed the most, and that's Spectres when.
So soon, fairly soon. It took more work than we expected, actually. Like, there was just a lot of
There's no way to do the
there's a
search,
lot
True
of
Gamer.
specific shit we have to
You'll
do,
start
but,
finding them
it won't
around
be- It's not too far away.
12 to 15 div, and
Well,
then
the
just keep
designers have to go
scrolling till you
through-
find
all
one.
monster designers have to
You
go
just
through and
set
make
price
spectral
minimum.
versions of every monster, which in PoE 1 was a lot easier, and in PoE 2 there is so much more manual designer-based scripting on like a monster-to-monster basis that we have to like take out all of that random stuff to do with dialogue and like, because you don't want to all of a sudden like have a specter come out and then you're like, it dies and your character says some random thing, and because all of a sudden now your character's just spamming random dialogue all the time, and like.
But there was even stuff that's kind of stupid where it's like, oh, the idle animation of this monster is loud. And so if you've got it as a specter, then like it makes it too annoying, and like just there's all sorts of random stuff that happens when you turn things into a specter that's kind of not obvious.
Effectively,
Yeah,
every
that
single
in PoE
monster has
1.
to be.
Yes, of
That
course.
is
Yeah,
still,
it's true.
well, we don't want to repeat those same problems, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So ideally, the audio team actually gets time to do proper specter mastering, so to speak, on all their audio for all the monsters. But no, I believe the designers are almost done with their part, which means it's then just audio and then a whole metric, which has been happening in parallel, but a whole metric ton of balance testing to make sure that we're not just, I mean, which is a lot, by the way. There's a lot of stuff that can go wrong with these
Well,
things.
balancing the spirit cost of each of these is going to be an
and
interesting.
testing it with every array of support gems. And, monsters can be set up kind of jank where you're like, yeah, that's like a projectile, but like it's using some other skill that's kind of actually like triggering projectiles, and so if you actually put multiple projectiles on it, it might not affect it in the way you think. And like from a damage perception of like I take less damage from projectiles, that's fine. From an avoidance perspective, it's fine. But then there'll be some weird thing where, because with like player skills, we actually code every single skill, like exactly here's how it's meant to work. It's like quite intricate. With monsters, we're cowboys. We just go ballistic and just set them up to make sure that they're good. And then all of a sudden you're like, oh right, we had to make a specter of this. Okay, well, and then you have to hack a bunch of stuff together. But it's also what allows us to be able to make a ludicrous amount of monsters all the time. But yes, now you have to make specters of all of them, which is. You're almost done. We've almost caught up to where we were, so I'd say soon, whatever soon means.
Not too far.
All right, so we are in the last portion. 5 minutes, some rapid fires. We'll fit whatever we can in within this 5 minutes, and we're done at this point. Thanks for going 10 minutes over at this point. So
That's all right.
I'm just going to pick random ones here. Search feature on an atlas, so you can search like.
Yep, we definitely should have that. This was something we even said before we even released, but we just never got time to do. But yeah,
That's really
we'll
nice
do
to
that
hear.
at some point.
Got it.
On the list.
On the list.
Tornado Bird in the game for Ultimatum is the hardest boss in the entire game, in my opinion, personally. Do you have
I
any
believe that's
feeling-
resolved, and 011 does have changes to that one. I
Okay,
believe.
he's ridiculous.
I
Got
saw it on
Thank
the
you.
list. I saw it on the patch notes.
All right.
Yeah, I just can't remember what skills. Yeah,
It was the tornado. Like it was more avoidable or something. There was some stuff. It is in the specific boss balance that got addressed in this.
We'll see after
He's
the
insane.
patch,
Yeah,
and then we'll make more changes if needed. Yeah.
OP. Okay, so auction house. We're getting spammed about this all the time. You've answered many questions. How are your guys' feelings about an auction house or in-game purchasing or buyout on the website or anything related to that?
I mean, I've talked about what we could do before. I don't have anything to announce right now.
Sure.
Yeah, we'll discuss this more. I'm sure this will come up again.
Sure. Accessibility question. Red-green color blindness is the most common in the world.
Yeah.
It's my understanding.
Yeah.
Obviously, red on green is a very common thing within Path of Exile 2, specifically in Ultimatum, which is a mandated ascendancy trial. So, for any plans around accessibility features for this?
Well, effectively, that's usually what we do for the stuff. Is rather than having a mode for it, we tend to just make sure that each thing, like, we test it on people who are actually colorblind. So I just need to get probably Reese to just test all the stuff specifically because I know he's red green colorblind, and just make sure that they're actually distinguishable. I generally prefer rather than having modes for it to like have
people with that color blindness highlighting the area. So ultimatum, as you said, being bad gives us a target, and we'll start someone there.
Yeah.
Sure. Speaking of visibility, rare and blue mobs. Can't really tell they're rare and blue mobs, or
That's
magic
true.
mobs, I should say. There's no highlight on them like in PoE 1. You know how there's like a little highlight around them? So you can't.
So the intention is that you can tell when a monster is based on the effect of the actual thing itself. There might be some cases where we're just not being successful in that regard, and so we just need to improve it.
We're going to do more there, and we are going to try some things that are give them magic and rare identifiers that aren't. The glows just really took you out of the, like, when you're in a dark dungeon and you're exploring it, like, just,
and honestly,
what the heck is this glowing beacon of light over here?
I just wish Fresnel glow was just banned in games generally. Like, it's just everyone just relies on it. Like, oh, we need to make this more visible. Add a Fresnel glow to it. Like, it's just this freaking it's a cancer in games generally. Sorry, this is just a random side rant from me, but I just hate the fact that everyone lazily goes to Fresnel glow and freaking everything.
Fair enough. Last question related to visuals. So visual effects in co-op can be very difficult. You know, you got people spamming lots of shit around. Any opinions on toggling other people's visual effects, etc.?
I don't want to add an option like that, but there is probably more we can do automatically for that kind of stuff.
There'll be some engine-based things we can do.
Yeah, there will be. There's probably more we can do, and just like that. But in my opinion, it should be automatic, and like you shouldn't even really be thinking about it. It should just happen. Like I'm not a fan of just like, oh, turn off all the effects. Like I'm just, it's kind of lame to me.
Fair enough. Disenchanting flasks for quality. They're one of the things you can't salvage in the game currently in order to get like the quality baubles back that you'll be able to do on flasks.
Right.
Is this intended?
Is there really any reason why we shouldn't do that? I know you were like, oh, it's because it doesn't thematically fit with a hammer on a bench. Smash the glass.
I mean, I think that's why it is, but like, I have nothing against adding it.
Yeah. We can probably change that, right? Like
I think it was more like, let's do something interesting for flask salvaging and crafting later and save that, but we can add it for now.
We should just add it. I have no problem adding it.
Yeah.
Okay. So we should probably nerf the drop rate of flasks slightly. High levels. That's just a random note that I was thinking about yesterday as I was picking up tons of flasks. Random side note. But
We've almost got all of them. Checkpoints and maps in order to backtrack in maps. How you feel about that?
Would be nice.
So not for resurrecting purposes,
just for
fast travel.
It's not a terrible idea. I'd have to think a little bit about how we would position those. I'm not against it necessarily. I guess the feeling is that there's not so many like objectives in maps in the same way.
When you do those linear maps and you missed a rare monster, you want to go play something else for a while.
You're right. So we should probably do something about this, but I don't have an exact understanding of what we would need to do perfectly.
Sure.
Yeah.
On the table, however. Okay. Being able to see gems without cutting. Currently, like you got to cut the gem to look at the list of skills.
I mean, I don't really have anything against it, but where the hell does the option go? I'll think about that. I'm not really against that.
Yeah. Maybe on the G button, top, click at all skills.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, maybe.
Right.
Maybe.
Gambler in the hideout. We have all the other vendors, but we don't have like a gambler in the hideout. For instance, like Alva normally does this.
For that, what was there was something very broken at the end, and we quickly turned it off. But I think we just need to fix one thing and then turn it back on. There was something very bad exploitation tier, and so we were just like disable. It's like 10 minutes until deployment kind of thing.
4 left, and we got through all of them. Okay, so Venom Quest is currently the only one that you can't reselect the rewards. So, for instance, you can reselect like the Titan Dome with the life.
Yes, I would love this to be reselect
from like chaos to attributes or whatever. Any opinions on keeping that permanent, or can we reselect?
I want to add a way to change that. Which I know people might be like, well, hold on, then why don't you want to allow a way to change the sentences? And the answer is I don't know. That's just how I feel.
I agree with him.
We'll allow you to change.
I might feel differently later, but yes, I do want to add a way to change that for sure.
Okay, movement speed on boots. Any feelings about having them be implicit, or I mean, basically movement speed mandatory on boots, or else you're really slowed down. So, how you guys feel about moving movement speed to implicits, or do you have any feelings on movement speed on boots?
I mean, I don't think it's necessarily a problem to have a mod that's really, really valuable on an item that you definitely want to go for. Like, boots is certainly the case where that's like the most extreme, but I don't necessarily think it's a problem as such. So, you know, like, I personally don't have a problem with it, but I don't know if you feel different.
I like it. Yeah. I like having it that, like, I think it's good.
Yeah,
I mean,
physical on a weapon.
if you added move speed implicitly to boots, would you then be like, okay, well, like IPD on weapons, like you start to get into funny territory in some sense, right? We're like, so anyway, that's kind of our feeling on it.
Last two, UI customization options. Is that potential?
I mean, you'd have to be more specific.
I think people just want
In
to be able to-
general, no. Like
I think they
if-
like
if
that
you're looking
PoE
at,
one,
like, you know,
so
like, we're not
streamers
gonna be
like
World of
would all be
Warcraft,
doing the
like,
same thing.
like UI mod type, yeah. But yeah, like if there's something specific, then you're like, I wish we could do this. Then maybe we would think about it. It's just a question of
Sure.
what
More
it
of a
is.
generic
Yeah.
question I was getting. Okay,
Yeah,
last
yeah.
one, boys. State of co-op and body blocking. Body blocking your with co-op here.
I think it's
That sounds funny.
There's something not right about it.
there's
but
something not right about it. I agree, but I do think you do need it to make things feel more physical. But there is something not right about it. But there shouldn't be, considering that players are actually. No, because you know what it is? It's because we changed really, really close to the end of development the size of the player instead of changing the size of all the monsters. And I think that probably results in like a situation. But yeah, but there's something not right about it. But I don't want to just completely remove it. We might end up with a solution where like the size of a player to other players is different than what the size is to other monsters or something like that in order to kind of like ease it. I suspect we'll do something along those lines. Yeah, that is it. It wasn't really on my radar, I have to admit, but we should do something about this. Yes.
And you'll forgive me for asking one last question that I'm curious about myself.
Yeah.
In terms of microtransactions coming from PoE 1 to PoE 2, do we have any cadence or quantity or any information we can give them when we're going to be seeing more of our previous purchases?
Well, the main thing is that by the time we go out of early access, we have to have all of them. As for the like rate at which they come through, I mean, look, we'll try and get as many as we can done in the near future. I honestly like.
This isn't their priority.
So the rigging team are like busy doing that, and I haven't paid enough attention to them. I need to go catch up with them and ask them, hey, how's that job going that I see you going on?
It's probably it turned into more work than we initially anticipated for sure. There's like a whole bunch of effects that don't translate one to one, so there's a lot of departments that have to do a lot of work. They are tuning through it. That being said, like, you know, it was certainly more complicated before when we were in that last like several month or 3-4 month like kind of lead up to release, and it was kind of like, okay, we need to have all hands on deck getting certain game content done, and yeah, we generally prioritize gameplay over microtransactions especially in those kind of moments. And so now it's going to ease up a bit, and we can allocate some a bit more resources there to get more of them ported across. But yeah, it did end up being a little bit more work than we actually anticipated. It's not just like a copy paste job and it's done. Some things have to be like kind of re-authored to actually work in one over the other. Mostly due to like lighting, I suppose, really is what is the big difference.
Yeah, so I don't have an immediate cadence for you, but yeah, we should start getting them coming out, like rolling out relatively soon.
All right, and I think that pretty much wraps it. I mean, we're getting spammed about Path of Exile 1's 3.26, but unless you want to talk about, you know...
Bit of a long topic to get into at this point.
Yeah, so I figured I'd just throw it out there, but that's
good.
it. Guys, you want to wrap it up?
All right.
Let's just say thank you for coming. And, you know, it always happens. We say 1.5 hour. It always goes above.
All right. That was a good patch notes. Better than any of us could have hoped, right? Nothing, absolutely nothing bad. Only good news for us. That was really long, though. That, exhausted me. No nerfs. Absolutely nothing of our build is nerfed. Except possibly they're hinting at maybe like the bleed. We're immune to bleed right now. Maybe we won't be immune to bleed. That's true. But he might also be like misinformed about that. I don't know. It's probably worth me writing that down. Potential nerf to bleed immunity. Nice for the sub, kid. No. It would be if we bleed, we're getting blood on the energy shield. There's no way they're gonna make it so if you can't be CI and you get insta-killed. I think he might be... I don't know if I believe that that's going to get reworked, though. It kind of makes sense. If your life isn't getting hit, why would you bleed? Why would an energy shield cause a bleed, right? Like, I feel like it just thematically makes sense, and maybe Jonathan's a little confused. Yeah, I think Jonathan was confused there. Wow, so we need to make 0 changes. I wonder if I have an item that's worth more now. I was on D&D this whole time. We're gonna get a trade message now. No, bleed is definitely not going through. But he was implying that maybe it would do damage, which I don't think it will. Tyrion sockets too. Wait. You leveled 1 to 60? What do you mean? During that, is my voice too high now? I see, nice. During fragments gonna skyrocket? You have a brief description of the filter? Well, if you watch the crafting video from a couple days ago, I go over, the bases we're showing and what they look like. So you can just watch the craft. I mean, it's supposed to go with side by side with the crafting. I don't know what else you'd want me to say. So I guess I can socket this temporalis. It's an endgame filter. It's a strict endgame filter that hides the garbage and it shows anything worth picking up. I mean, I don't know what else to say. If I think it's not worth picking up, it's not going to be in the filter. I gained 100 energy shield. The filter is showing the optimal amount of stuff, in my opinion. But again, it's like a personalized opinion. If I don't think something is worth showing, I'll hide it. I was gonna raid you, Miracles. Thanks for the raid. Dude, 0 nerfs. You got everything you didn't want. I'm not too surprised by 0 nerfs. Like, people were dooming, so I was like, you know what, there might be a little bit of nerfs, but like, they definitely weren't gonna gut anything. But we are, I guess it was just early enough in the league that they could. We're gonna get a new league reset soon, right? They said as soon as possible. I feel like that's 1 month. What do you think? Do you think it's probably not shorter than a month, but you're gonna get a 2-month league? Because if it was gonna be longer than a month, he would have probably said we want to do like the 3-month cycle. But he says like as soon as possible. So I think we're gonna get a 2-month league and then a reset. The thing about bleed and energy shield is most likely Jonathan being confused. Right now, we can't have bleeds on our character because our life isn't getting hit, and Jonathan was like, no, bleeds are supposed to be the counter to energy shield, so you should be able to be bled. But I think it thematically makes sense. You can only lose blood if your life is getting hit. There's no blood on a energy shield, so why would you get bleed? Yeah, we're getting like a what, August, September, October, November, December, January, February, a 7-month PoE1 league. Maybe you won't buy Dream Fragments. What is a Dream Fragments worth right now? It's 80. I mean, that's not any higher than they used to be, is it? Uncorrupted is 95, I see. No, they're not moving away from Period 1. It's just, this... I guess Period 2 has just so many players that they want to, like, ride on the success, right? Obviously, if you have a game that's just so much more wildly popular than the other one, it makes sense to, like, put all your effort into that, at least until the interest dies down a little bit. You're farming 5/10 math, but you have low damage. Rarity is not very impactful. If you have 100% rarity, you only get, like, instead of dropping like 100 exalted orbs, you'll drop 110. That's basically what it does. But if you're killing monsters slower, you will drop more than 10 chaos just by having more power. So I wouldn't even think about rarity. It's not overpowered as people are saying. And definitely don't go more than 100. Once you go over 100, it doesn't really do much at all. I don't even have 100 rarity on my character right now. The loot filter that I'm sharing in the latest YouTube video should work for console. You should be able to auto subscribe to my filter on console just through the website, and you don't have to do anything else. It'll just be there on your console. If I change it, it'll change on your console, and that's coming with the next patch, I think. Why not switch to the full mana one? Because I don't like dying, and I have a lot of damage either way. You will die on the full mana. I've played the full mana. We've done it. I was dying on it. I wasn't dying a lot, but I was dying more than I am now. I may switch, though. You get stunned a lot, and you will die to stuff that you might not die otherwise. Maybe next stream we'll swap back, though. The thing is with Temporalis, I don't have that much mana pool, right? And I do like to be able to go really fast with this. So I feel like if I did swap to the mana version, I might put on the, like a more mana focused body armor. You can't take out the socket. You can just replace, you can just like overwrite it. Thanks for the follow. That build you're talking about is getting nerfed. They said so on the stream. So if you want to play that, play it in the next couple of days, because it's not going to exist afterwards. Or, I mean, it'll probably still exist. It just won't be able to crit off of a crit. I'm sure it'll still be fine. Oh, really? To me, it looked like they were clicking it and replacing it. I think they said patch notes in the next couple days. I'm not sure, though. It replaces it, yeah. How are the volume levels right now? Is my voice in the game fine? Because I had to switch all these bars around. Actually, hold on. I think I just switched back to the scene and it'll be fine. Now we're back to the normal. But yeah, crazy patch. So we're putting Katako's back on because I felt the other thing was a little bit squishy. I might try Katako's with some mana gear next stream. Oh, we'll see. I'm not sure. No, I'm putting it back on. It just feels nice. Electrocuting feels nice. I wasn't using it for the last few days. Right now my character is just fully spec'd into defense. Maybe with Katako's I should put on the damage shield at least. We'll see. I think I probably should. The damage shield is a lot more than this. I don't need block. I am res cap with Katako's, yeah. Lightning Rod, the best anoint for damage. I think it's pretty good even if you do go crit, because if you go crit, you're not critting every hit. A lot of crit builds have, like, I don't know, like, maybe like 25 to 50% crit chance. So then the other half of the time you're still gonna get the bonus. So yeah, I'd say it's pretty good no matter what. It's gonna be hard to beat that. I don't know how much it costs. I'm gonna guess around 8 to 15 in that range. I don't know. They said they'd move the characters? What do you mean by that? I have no idea what you're talking about. I've type exclamation build Bark TV. The leveling guide's like the second video in it. Basically that playlist will hold your hand no matter what you're trying to do. The stuff at the beginning of the playlist is suited for the beginning of your journey. The stuff near the end is for like really hardcore min-maxing. It's ordered so that you can just use the videos from the start to the end.
There is power in this object. I can feel it. Will of the Marrakech.
You're welcome. Yeah, I'll probably go... Well, I'll think hard about going back to mana. I want to be tankier than last time I did it. Last time I did it, I wasn't happy with how tanky it was. You just kill them before they even get close to you, because you can get a lot more damage if you're mana only. I'm using around 30 points to get my energy shield. It's a lot of investment. It's a high price to pay. You just throw all of that into damage. It's just so comfy. But yeah, I feel like we're at the stage where, like, what else am I gonna do? The only thing is, go mana, go full mana. Why do you think you need to be adorned? You can literally just put the points in crit, and then in more crit. You do not need to invest in all these jewels. How much is Adorn scaling your mana? Do you have 10 int on every one of your jewels? So you're getting like 20 int from like 10 jewels or something? That is very expensive. That's like not feasible for most people, myself included. But you don't have to do that. You can just go crit and stay where you are. Yeah, but what you're saying is what you need to do costs like at least a couple hundred divines. You don't have to do that. You're framing that like you have to do that. But you literally wrote that. You said you have to do Adorned. That's what you wrote. Is that not what you wrote? $7,000 ES. That's a lot of ES. You could maybe pull off some energy shield investment. Are you getting percent ES on your jewels? You could get something different on those instead. But it is nice to have a lot of... Dude, 2 maps, 2 Divine Orbs. What is going on? We're in the nice the quant zone, are we? I think this map might have a lot of quant. I'll check afterwards. I never drop Scouring Winds. What do you mean? I've never not had Scouring Winds. I take off Elemental Storm, and I put the exposure on Orb of Storms. I'm gonna make another, I'm gonna make a witch next, I think. At some point. Unless I see something really fun on a different class. I don't love melee. I played it recently in PoE 1, but I mean, even after playing that, I don't want to play it again. But once. Good enough for me. I'm not sure. I haven't really looked at what people are doing. Is Detonate Dead a witch build? I don't know if I want to do Detonate Dead though. I might want to do something else. Detonate Dead looks pretty powerful.
Didn't break a sweat.
Or for bothing. What's the spell where they're shooting those bones? You know, there's a bunch of these bones over your head and you shoot them all? That's not done on a witch though, is it? It's done on somebody else. Bone Storm, I think? I forget what class does that. Is that like a ranger that does that? Oh, this isn't even turned on. Yeah, these maps have like 50 quant on them. It's a shame these don't have breach. You think it's even worth running these if they don't have breach with 50 quant? I don't know. This one has half the quant, but it has a breach. Is it not recommended to follow if you don't have the Metamorphosis jewel? No, I'm just making my own quant tablets. I'm still using the Telesorc tree. The reason this is so nice, the massive jewel, is because you get all this spirit and you don't need to pay all these points. It's just very, very valuable. If you didn't have this, would you still do the tree? I don't know if you have enough points to come down here without it. Like, we're saving so many points using this. I don't think you can do the tree without it. It needs to be massive ring. The chaos res roll on it doesn't matter because we're immune to chaos damage, but the But the alley res is, well, it's nice to get a low roll of that. Makes gearing easier. It's a lot cheaper if you just take a bigger res hit. It's amazing, nice. Love to hear it. It's called Controlled Metamorphosis. And when you're searching, you need to put in a number for the radius. And I believe, like, you need to minimum 8, maximum 8 to only find the massive one. At some point. Well, I'm using Cast on Shock right now. It's the latest type exclamation Telesaur. So, what Cast on Shock is good for is bossing. It's not very good for mapping. I don't feel like you need it for mapping. So the way this build works is we have Blink for mapping to map really fast. And then if we're doing a Pinnacle boss, you literally just turn off Blink, turn on Cast and Shocked. Lightning Conduit, LE Focus, Impetus, Rising Tempest considered casting. I could maybe change Rising Tempest for Lightning Mastery, maybe. I don't want to keep that on all the time because there's no point. It just, like, it drains, or it's not very, there's no good reason to have it on for mapping, is there? Are you guys using Lightning Conduit while mapping? I feel like you just don't need it. Like, the blink makes more sense, right? You go faster. But, I mean, you could just turn on the Lightning Conduit while mapping if you want to. I just don't think it's necessary. Blink is very nice. So.
Victory is mine.
You do? So you just have it on at all times? Like, it doesn't even proc that often if you, on random monsters, right? So I just don't even feel like it's that good. True. Like, the strength of Cast on Shock is on unique monsters, so that's why I only use it on unique monsters. I guess there's, like, situations where you might use it in a map, but I generally don't bother with it. It was minimum 8, maximum 8. I don't remember if I talk about it in this, but I could actually just tell you. So, the rotation is you slam down Sigil, then you boost it up to 4, and then you do the Soul Offering, which I actually don't even have it binded correctly. You turn on Cast on Shock. To know how to do the Soul Offering tech, I have a video that's talking about how to use Spirit. It's like in the last couple of weeks. Okay, now it's set up. That gives a lot of damage. Kill them. Then you just have Cast on Shock on. I don't know, it's mostly in the Telesaur. I guess I could make a video going over specifically the rotation. Thanks for the sub, Booty. Appreciate you.
Didn't break a sweat.
2 simulacrum nodes? Yeah, that is kind of cracked. I don't use Mana Tempest anymore. I don't have the slots for it. Mana Tempest is quite nice for, like, breaches because it gives you a lot of chain and a lot of fork. It's not really that useful against bossing, I don't think. It would be very nice for breach, but I just don't have it on right now. Thanks for the follow. Dang, subbing before you're even followed. That is awesome. Ball ring and divine it. Well, there are 8 different possibilities, right? Because it's 8 is the massive one. So it will take on average, what, like 7 divines to hit it? But that's, it could be a lot more or a lot less. I wouldn't do that. I feel like you could get really sad if you did that. I would just save up for it if you don't have it. It's too risky to divine that shit. Mind you, I do divine them and I sell it as soon as it's like anything decent. I don't divine strictly for the massive. If you know what you're doing, you could divine it. But you're not just going to spam it until it says massive. That is crazy. You need to spam it until it's like better than the shittiest one and then just sell it. Good ones are 20. I think you can get one for around like 15 if you just wait. Just wait till someone just like live search it. I don't know. A good one. So a good one means it needs to have resistance and be massive, because even if you're spamming it, like what are the odds of it being good and also massive? You got to think about that. You might hit a massive one after 8 slams, but then you also have to hit the extra layer of RNG of hitting like a perfect resistance roll. That's very hard. It's up to you though. You could gamba, but that is like that's not an obvious gamba that you win. 13 div for -7. Yeah, it's not. You're not gonna hit like a -5 by divining it. That's like mathematically unlikely. I do not use omens to roll my maps. Dude, that's so tryhard. I applaud the people who do. I guess I could just mass buy them with a buy order. We could do a stream where I do this, I guess. It's probably worth it. It's not hard. It is annoying though. I don't mind having suffixes. I'm kind of tired after that thing. I kind of wanted to take a break now. Should I end stream and come back tomorrow? Maybe I do that. I'm gonna raid Arrow because Arrow was hoping there'd be spark nerfs. So I'm gonna gloat. There's no buffs, no nerfs. That's so funny. Yeah, maybe I'll do that. Silver 1. It's good to do that. I'll see you guys tomorrow. It's fun. Fun stream. Very happy with these patch notes. Take care, guys.